Hello.
That's what we like to see. A super prepared Sotek.
Yeah, there we go.
The tablets of the old ones were peeking out slightly there, and we all got just the smallest glimpse into what lies behind Sotek's plans.
Oh yeah, it's so exciting.
So as always, do take a quick check out there. Can you hear us? Are we nice and loud? And do we have similar levels?
Yeah, please let us know. Hope you're all having a good Sunday. I just realized I also need to grab these little things here. But yeah, if everyone could just give the okay, I think we're good.
We're good. And as always, we are going to be taking our super chats in batches. And it's a perfect time to bring up a lovely comment from the ever and always lovely Biofoot, who says, "Good morning, gents." Good morning. It's not morning for me. It's deeply into good afternoon territory.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not showing up, but okay, I saw...
I'm a bit quieter, so I'm going to see if I can sort that for you.
Sure.
Let's try that.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that got way louder.
Okay, how do we compare in volume now? Am I too loud? Do I need to turn down slightly?
I think it sounds good. I don't know what chat would say.
While we're doing that, we'll be taking our super chats in batches throughout the course of this stream. This is a stream where, as is the case with all of our streams, your contributions are absolutely essential, as Biofoot has done here, who genuinely loves the passion and care that we bring to every Lorebeards episode. It's a highlight of the day when you're both able to wax lyrical about the setting you love so, Fishmen.
Yeah, so Fishman. I will note, just through sheer happenstance,
Lorebeards happenstance.
Yeah,
we're on fire today.
It's early. One of the things I saw just running around yesterday was that there was actually a super chat someone did yesterday when the stream got, I think, put up. Instead of waiting for the stream to start, and I just happened to look at it, and I just happened to remember it, which is that someone asked about Dechala, if they thought they would be a good legendary lord alongside, I think it was they talked about wanting to do it with Norska and High Elves. Unfortunately, I don't remember the specifics, and I can't get it to show back up, which is weird.
Yeah, I don't see it here either, which is deeply annoying.
But I definitely saw it yesterday. So all I'll say to that person, whoever it was, that I did see it, and yes.
Yes. Let's just say yes. So we'll run through our quick early ones before we get jumping into our favorite Slaneshi champion, Dechala the Denied One. Jaguar Philosopher drops in with a "Dominate me, Snake Mommy!"
That's good. That's the energy we need for this morning. That's good.
Oh, yeah. Anthony Riley, woo! A stream I can catch live on time. Absolutely delighted you're watching us live for a change. And as always, do drop in comments as we go. Giles Barnes drops in with the morning. It's 1 a.m. here in Australia. My God, that's as bad as our midnight Wednesday streams for me, where we start at midnight and I'm a bit bleary-eyed. By the end of it, I'm like...
Poor Australia.
Yeah, right. Australia. So, delighted that you managed to make it alongside us live. I'm looking forward to this one in particular. The Laughing Godren drops in. Alas, I work, but I shall keep an earbud tucked under my cap. I'm looking forward to imagining that earbud there. Looking forward to learning more about this character who has fallen under my radar, and you'll find through the course of this there's a reason why it's fallen under your radar. It's a character that Games Workshop themselves hasn't touched upon much, but it's definitely got enough background for us to have a good dive into.
You have to have a pretty sensitive radar to have picked up Dechala, to be fair.
Yeah, it's fair. Sparrowhawk pops. It's 1 in the morning and all is well.
More Australian.
Over here in the UK, yeah, quite. Over here in the UK, it is 4 p.m. in the afternoon, which I think is quite a comfortable time to be streaming on a Sunday, if you ask me.
Just 10 a.m. over here. It's not too bad.
Yeah. So, shall we dive in, or have you got anything you'd like to say before we go?
I think the only thing I'd like to say is that just a reminder, just of things that we've got going on. For one, that we are now officially a week ahead on doing the votes for Lorebeards, which is wild. So at the end of the stream, I will announce what the subject for next week will be, and then Andy will post his vote today, which will be for the week after that. Which will make things a little better, I think. Also, make sure to join us this Wednesday for something. We'll talk about it after the stream, so I don't know what it is, but it'll be something.
It's certainly going to be fun.
Yeah, we're a week ahead on the Sundays, and we're it's stupidity on Wednesday, so it's great. And last thing would be, if you haven't already, make sure you are checking out Rookery Publications YouTube channel. They are back for season 8.
Yeah, we are.
And they just did a whole stream talking about Dark Deeds and a lot of the goodies there. So if you haven't, make sure you check that out. And we'll get links to that posted in chat. So if you want to watch something after this stream, I'd really recommend that. And the last thing I'll say is, if you haven't already, now is better than never to start watching Lorehammer, which just started their kind of post part 3. And I have not actually caught yesterday's episode yet. I have to wait until later today or tomorrow. But,
this episode. Sorry, I actually broke at the end of it. I just couldn't stop laughing. I was crying, given what they had done. And all you could see was everyone in the background going, Andy Leese can't not be here. Without him, everything goes wrong. It was hilarious. Super, super fun times. And let me just add a little extra comment on the Dark Deeds front. If you have already pre-ordered the game, you should be, if you're getting your order from the US hub, receiving an email within the next week saying your order is about to be shipped to you. Woohoo! Beyond that, if you're waiting from the EU hub, which isn't the EU hub, it's UK hub, because, hey, UK, we don't need the EU because we're stupid. If you're waiting from the UK hub, that will hopefully be shipping out the week after that. As soon as we've got confirmation that's the case, we will be doing a quick song and dance about that over on the Rookery side. And if you haven't pre-ordered already, I am actually welling up with tears over at this side. How could you do that? It has nothing to do with the fact that the pollen here is terrible, and for the first time in a while, I'm reacting like mad. So if I start weeping, it's because you haven't pre-ordered Dark Deeds, not because I'm allergic.
Good. Wow.
I am really close to weeping, though.
It's because of the terrible beauties and the twisted monstrosities that await us in today's subject matter.
Absolutely, that is the pain and pleasure that awaits us all.
Yeah, but I believe that's all of the little side things. So if you're ready to hop into it, I think we're good to hop into it.
Okay, I know I've said this before, but my intro this week is going to be pretty short.
All right, so
no, seriously,
okay, we are 7 minutes 45 seconds in. Let's see where this goes.
Seriously, it is. Because this time we're going back to the 5th edition of Warhammer. And at this point, I was working for Games Workshop in their stores. having myself the time of my life. Having chosen to go there because, well, that's a story you probably don't need to know about just now. And a new army list, which had been put together by Thomas Prinnan, was released. And it was to support the recent Chaos box set that had been released for 5th edition. And the Chaos box set did something for the fantasy battle game, which sort of hasn't been done since, in that it properly gave all of your units mutations and did all sorts of cool stuff that made your models go beyond simply what they looked like when you dropped them down on the battlefield. You have mutation cards. This unit has +1 arms on all models. And you looked at the models and went, it does? Yeah, sure. Okay, fair. Mutation card has 1. And the Champions of Chaos were released separately to the core list. And in the Champions of Chaos, there was a great swathe, or swath if you prefer, of different characters that became almost staples for the Chaos forces over the course of the many years that would come later down through the editions. And one of these characters was Dechala, the Denied One. Now, Dechala, when she was very first presented to me, I went, ooh, this sounds awesome. I won't go into the details because we're going to be doing that through the course of the stream. But suffice it to say, when I read her description, I went, this model is going to kick ass, it's going to chew gum, and it's going to be just the best. As a small little aside, I have long harbored a small Slaneshi force at the side. You can make of that what you will. I enjoy collecting the models, and I have quite enjoyed playing with them as an army. I was looking forward to the model, but when it came out, it is fair to say that it was a monstrosity. Now, I was working in the stores at the time, so I had to try and pretend that this model somehow matched the description of not only one of the most beautiful alien entities that Warhammer had to offer, but also one of the most disturbing all at once. It was, frankly, mostly just kind of disturbing.
I was going to say, so they nailed one half of the equation.
Yeah, they did nail one half of the equation. Now, it's a bit unfair because we are dealing back in the time of metal models, and it was difficult to achieve the same scale that we would have nowadays. Having said that, though, the opportunity that they had here to create something that was truly awesome was, well, just there. Her stats were extraordinary. She was literally nails hard, and a lot of points went along with it. Without a mount, you tend to find that most of the characters in Warhammer cost tons of points because they're on a monster. She was the monster with her big, long serpentine tail. But the model that they eventually released was that thing.
Oof. Man, that face is something.
Yeah, it's pretty damn basic. And even something like Arbal the Undefeated, which was on a monster base, much bigger at the time, released at about the same time, looked much, much better. She just did not kick ass and chew gum. We're going to go into the details of her history and where she comes from in a mo. Let's just simply leave it off there and say, at this point, I was a deeply disappointed Slaanesh player. I never used her once. I used her about 5 times because she was kick-ass. And there was no way that I was going to avoid using her, even though I hated the model. Much like the Nagash model of that era, which looked like a clown, I tried to convert my own one. And I did a conversion of my own one. It ended up being on a monster base. It was much bigger, 6-armed monstrosity. It was super, super cool. I loved that. And I went away happy, ignoring the official model. And then I sold that model at a convention once for £120. So, nice. Where do we go from there? We kind of don't, as far as official Warhammer is concerned, because as we move to the next set of editions, as we go to 6th, 7th, and 8th, Dechala is ignored, which is super interesting as we're about to dive into when we go into her background, because she is expressly marked inside the 5th edition version as being pretty much the champion of champions when it comes to Slaanesh. She gets replaced by other characters, but not so much replaced as just ignored. Because we eventually do hit the end times. And in the end times, we get ourselves a special mention where she and Arbal the Undefeated tag team their way across End, destroying it all. Because, hey, why not? And then go into a little bit more details as to exactly potentially what she is, who she is, how could she be what she is, which we're going to cover as we go through the stream. Because the core story that's presented inside another source, I'll get to that in a moment, is completely kinda ignored by the end times. But then again, as we've discussed on more than one occasion, the end times tends to take somewhat loose use of characters and take some very odd decisions through the course of it. We may describe it as rushed. You might think it's brilliant. We all have our own opinions on that one. Dechala, however, was mentioned in one other source, and this is where we really get the primary source of lore. And we're going to be diving into that one deep, because that one is our primary source. It's the Liber Chaotica, which is currently being held by Sotek there. And the Liber Chaotica was a brilliant book. It's truly great. If you haven't got a copy, then go spend £10,000 on eBay and grab your own. Because it's approximately that expensive.
He's not kidding. It's about that expensive.
Yeah, pretty much. And is actually a steal for 10K because, hey, who doesn't want to spend that much money on one piece of paper you could probably get an illegal PDF of online from somewhere anyway? So £10,000 aside, that book took pretty much all of the information that had ever been written about Chaos and then added detail to all the bits that kind of lacked it. And one of the bits of detail added in the Slaanesh portion of the Liber Chaotica, or if you bought them separately in the Slaanesh book, was a entire, well, it's not entire chapter, it's like 3 pages as I recall, dropped down to the denied one. And here we get the tiny bit of lore that had already been presented in the 5th edition, and it's expanded significantly. But I will make a note here before we start diving into that lore, because it's expanded in a way that I think Marianne always did very well with his work. So that was the author, Marianne Verstauffer. I do apologize, MVS, if you're out there. And
his name just sounds like an Imperial Scholar character.
Oh, indeed. And I used to chat with him back in the time when we were working together on second edition books for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. And NVS, he did something which I think a lot of Warhammer writers could learn from. In that he said, so there is this horrific entity. There are thousands of stories about this horrific entity. 12 of them sort of marry up. Here's a couple of them. And this entity still exists and is horrific. And we're going to go into some more of the details because there's a couple of super interesting details that are dropped in that particular write-up. But what it did was it added an unreliable narrator to an entity that is, and I'm going to be relatively blunt about this, this character is immense, both in terms of her Warhammer stats, which often Warhammer stats are a bit dialed down. No, she's actually kick-ass.
Dechala is fucking nuts, actually.
Yeah, totally. And actually what she represents in the background as well, and we'll get into that. And I think this is, for me at least, one of the biggest shames of not necessarily the end times, but Warhammer as a whole, is that they've got this actually immense character that asks questions not only of the background of Slaanesh, of demon princedom, and also just of the core of what elves are and how they can express, depending upon which story of the Dechala, the denied one, you go with. And all of those questions are at their best posed, but not necessarily answered. And I think that the Liber Chaotica did this beautifully, where other sources in times did not do this beautifully. And as we go through the background of Dechala during the course of this stream, you're going to find that we have ourselves a character that is, I would argue, extremely fascinating and extremely interesting, but one that is, by the end, just given incredibly short shrift with a couple of short paragraphs in a novel and almost de-characterized rather than characterized through how she eventually is used in the end times. So that's my intro. I don't think that's too long. Too long, pardon me. It wasn't a half-hour giant one.
No, it's only just 10 minutes. Yeah, no.
Just 10 minutes, that's pretty good. I'll also add that I'm particularly pleased that we're finally getting onto a Slaanesh stream because we have been circumventing Slaanesh on more than one occasion. I don't think we've had one at all. Not at least that I can think of.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
And we've skirted along the edge as we've discussed various, chaosy, gaudy things and various elven things, but we've not actually dived into anyone Slaanesh facing. So this is a bit of a first for us, and I'm super happy to see where it lands.
Yeah, so Dechala is a pretty interesting character that, kind of like Annie was saying, one of the things that's super interesting about this book in particular, the Champions of Chaos, which is almost like a little magazine, as like a traditional book. Like if you're used to Warhammer nowadays, you'd look at this and be like, there's so few pages. Like, actually, interesting. It's a lot like the modern day Warhammer Arcane Journals. Warhammer Fantasy Arcane Journals, which is kind of interesting to think about. Though the Arcane Journals are even smaller, but because those are actual just magazines, whereas this is a proper book, it's just a small one. But one of the things that's really interesting about Dechala is that, like Andy was saying, she doesn't get a lot of attention. She shows up very, very, very rarely, outside of, like, she just has those 2 entries, and then she makes a cameo in the end times. Though, like Andy said, the version of her that shows up there is very different from the versions that were described in the earlier lore, and that's it. But despite that, she very much launched into the cultural zeitgeist of Warhammer Fantasy fans with, like, an iron grip, to the extent that when you're dealing with, like, the modern day Total War fandom, she is by far one of the most popular Slaanesh characters that people are wanting to get their hands on really, really badly, to the point that when the Champions of Chaos DLC came out, which featured a different mortal champion for each of the gods, there was a small bit of controversy when they revealed that it was Azazel who was going to feature as the Slaanesh character, because a lot of people sort of looked at that and went, well, Azazel's a demon prince, so it kind of feels like he should be, it should be a mortal character that's not a demon, so it should be Dechala, right? And it caused, like, a whole bunch of chatting back and forth. But, it is what it is. But Dechala really does seem like a character who is kind of inevitable at this point, coming for the Slaanesh DLC we have coming up after the upcoming Khorne one. But, so, without further ado, we're gonna dive into our history after we knock out some super chat stuff real quick, and then we'll see where it takes us. So let's see. We have all of our. Also, thank you to all the 1 a.m. Australians. We appreciate y'all taking the time to come hang out.
Certainly do.
Let's see. Last at work, keep an earbud tucked under your cap. Well, make sure you pay attention if your job involves anything that you have to watch out for. And, let's see. We need an Andy saying that notification. I don't know what Andy said that you think is notification worthy, but
that notification.
I don't think that's what. Anyway, I never thought Lorebeards would get so handsy. Oh, we put our hands all over everything in the lore. It is. I mean, hell, Andy's fingerprints, or you could say Andy's DNA is in the lore. So
dude, it's getting a bit flattery. Let's move on.
So Dechala is based on deity's Merilith, right? That is probably not an incorrect.
So I think there's only one person who could probably answer that, and that's Thomas himself. And actually, it's quite possible Mark might be reaching out to Thomas to come on to the Rookery. So if he comes on, I'll ask him directly. But given what Merilith is, I think you're probably right. Or it could just be a coincidence.
Sean, could we get another Dechala or a new Twisted Elf? It's certainly possible. If you actually go back and read older books, bumping into Chaos Elves, so to speak, was not that unusual. If you read like the Gilead series, Gilead has like a whole fight with like a whole colony of Chaos Elves that are in some random like abandoned high elf colony forest settlement. Which when you read it, and if you were like me when I was young, where I started Warhammer Fantasy pretty much in 6th edition, because I came in right at the tail end, like the absolute ending of 5th edition. And when I was reading Gilead's probably during 7th edition, because they did reprints of it, I was reading it being like, what is happening in this book? Like, what are all these weird ass concepts that are being brought up? Because it was a much older series that had that I believe had been more of like a set of White Dwarf stories or something that got reprinted into some books. Because one of the books was more, it almost felt like Gotrek and Felix Trollslayer, where it was like a story and then it would end, and then a story and then it would end, and story and it would end, all contained within a book. It is a fun series though.
Which book's the first one again? Is that Gilead's Blood?
It's either Gilead's Curse or Gilead's Blood.
Blood, yeah. They're Nathan Long, aren't they?
I want to say so.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. But loosely speaking, yes, exactly that. Elves, up until 5th edition, mutated just like everyone else. But from about 6th edition onwards, that stopped. And it just wasn't the case. It was sort of hesitantly not the case in 4th and 5th edition of Warhammer. But by 6th, it got nailed into place and then started to get express and explicit mentions in multiple places before we eventually arrive in 8th edition, where they actually spell it out in black and white in the intro to each of the Elven army lists. Elves do not mutate. They do not at all. Which in some respects leaves Dechala lying in the dust behind them, because she possibly is an elf who has mutated. And I'm going to go from possibly to probably, given the various sources that we have. But we'll get to that as we progress.
Yep. Anthony, paperback of Liber Chaotica is $200 US.
It's a bargain. Buy it now.
Paperback. Yeah. The hardback is much more expensive, but yeah. $200 is actually, I know this sounds ridiculous. That's actually not bad for what you get in the book. The artwork and everything is gorgeous. Hammond, what's her American name? Dechala the Deep Fried One. That feels like a Fishman joke combined with an American joke combined with a Slanesh joke combined with it, but
OMG.
Slanesh calamari. Darius Rose got the PDF of the Liber Chaotica. Awesome book. I loved how it even makes Marauders look like Giga Chads. So the thing that's really good about the Liber Chaotica is A, great usage of the word there, but B, it is so good because it's completely in universe. The entire book. I don't think there's anything in it that's not in universe perspective from the author, Richter. And it's a really, really good show of what chaos actually looks like from an empire perspective. which makes you realize, oh shit, okay, even those things that are just like 3s across the board, which is pretty minimal, are really terrifying from like an Imperial perspective. It also hilariously gives you a lot of surprisingly good insight into what a Warhammer Fantasy character would think of 40k, because he sees the 40k universe and writes down his thoughts on it. And the spoiler is he does not think it's very good. He's like, wow, that shit looks terrible. Good thing I'm not there. Which is pretty great. Andy, I triple dog dare you shave your mustache. No, you would have to donate like thousands of dollars. No, $2.
That's not happening in a hurry.
Dark Deeds pre-ordered. Time for Skullduggery.
Oh, Vanny DK, you kick ass. I love you so much.
Sigvald versus Dechala. They represent very different ideas.
Yeah, very.
And honestly, to be frank, based on her tabletop profile, Dechala would curb stomp Sigvald.
Yes, probably.
This woman has a special rule where if she deals 1 wound to you in melee, then you cannot attack her for the rest of the game. Like, what? That is insane. So yeah, no, Dechala would mop the floor with them. Anthony, best place to get Warhammer Fantasy roleplay books if local shops don't have many. Either eBay, Wolfrup books.
Wolfrup's slightly different.
Yeah. You can order them from the Cubicle 7 website if you want the modern ones. You can get a lot of the OG ones on Drive-Thru RPG. They have a ton of the original ones easy for sale for like very reasonable prices. You get really high quality PDFs. Those are probably the best places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And also keep an eye on oh god, what's that website that does like charity stuff where you can give them as much as you want and they sell you like a bundle.
Humble Bundle.
Yeah, Humble Bundle. They do a lot of Warhammer Fantasy roleplay, surprisingly.
Yeah. Dom often reaches out to them to do deals with them. So yeah, do watch out for those deals because they can often be super good for your pocket.
Yeah, Humble Bundle, you can get an insane amount of Warhammer Fantasy goodies very cheaply. Dechala, and help support charity at the same time. Dechala has such a classically tragic backstory. Turning to chaos because Crimlo denied her another taco is so sad. Worst thing Crimlo has ever done. He truly is a tyrant.
Dechala does love her tacos.
What were you saying earlier about Laughing God? It was Dominate Me Snake Mommy 1. Oh, okay. Well, you can go back and grab that sound clip. We'll make that into an alert. Andy will love that. I've long wondered if there could be elves that are mutants or even beastmen. That is a genuinely, I would say the answer is probably yes.
No.
But it is,
no.
But man,
No.
it is not well explored. But man, it's fun to think about.
If you were looking at the Realms of Chaos as they were pitched all the way back in 3rd edition and 1st edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, definitely yes, indeed. They would not just toy around with that. That would be part of their setting. But by the time we hit the 8th edition, that is so far removed with what the elves have become because they've gone beyond simply having Tolkien-style elves or the elder races from Michael Moorcock's books. And then adding Michael Moorcock's chaos to them. So basically, in Michael Moorcock's world, elves and their equivalents, Melnibonians or Eldrin or anything similar, all mutated just like anyone else when exposed to chaos. And Warhammer ported that all over without really doing much in the way of editing when they copy-pasted. That changed as Warhammer started to change each of their individual species and factions and make them Warhammer versions rather than simply stuff that was copied from elsewhere. And as we've already discussed in this stream, Dechala may have been copied over as well from D&D in this case. They just never really updated her to make her a Warhammer thing rather than just a potential copy-paste. So originally the answer would be yes, definitely. Later though, as Warhammer Elves became their own unique thing, they no longer really have anything close to a tie to the mutants that plague the world and what Beastmen have as their core origins. Yeah,
if there was an example of that, it would be an individual because they're that level of rare. Which we'll kind of get into. Marathi is proof they mutate in Age of Sigmar. Age of Sigmar is very different. Age of Sigmar does have And like hell, there's an entire species of beast elves, which are their Kanathi, which are kind of like they're basically like, what if we took Orion from Warhammer Fantasy and made it like a species instead of just one guy? And that's what they ran with, and it's fun. I like it.
So I would add one part there and say that the word mutation is perhaps not best applied there. Instead, divine intervention and change that is implemented upon said species may be a better route.
I don't think Age of Sigmar elves mutate. I think there's just different species, but I don't think they actually mutate still.
Yeah, quite. They're a bit different, but Age of Sigmar is as amorphous as you can imagine for a setting because it's still locking itself down. Even though we're hitting, what, 4th edition it's sitting on just now?
Yes.
Yeah, even though it's hitting 4th edition, they're still going, oh no, actually it's this. Actually, it's this, as they're slowly but surely turning it into its own thing. And it's fair to say that the decisions that Age of Sigmar needs to make are quite different to the ones that were being made for 8th edition. 8th edition is the core setting for Warhammer, with a bit of a nod to Old World as well, although I reckon the studio still uses 8th edition as its core starting point. That being the case, if you want any answers for Warhammer versions, it's always 8th edition you go to, and not Age of Sigmar.
Yep. Even the power of chaos pales before elf bullshit.
You're so not wrong.
Even the dark gods are sitting there watching what's going on, going bullshit.
And I think that in itself is a super interesting thing for us to discuss as we go on, as to why that is the case, what's going on there.
Yep. And we've got 2 more, and then we'll delve into it. What do you think about Morathi spreading Celeste corruption into the war? I personally thought that she shouldn't be doing so without significant drawbacks to herself. What are your thoughts on that? To put it very simply, it's basically just a fun callback to the Cult of Pleasure from the Storm of Chaos, and also she uses a lot of Celeste stuff and she uses whatever she wants. The fact that she spreads Celeste corruption and deliberately ignores the penalties, I think actually fits her better, and is really fun. And also just helps her have a very unique gimmick, and unique campaign system. So I have no problem with it. But
I am. Oh, sorry. Go carry.
Oh yeah, it's just like a fun haha, Storm of Chaos is.
I think it's entirely fitting for her. Now, she has different versions of her. In some versions of Morathi, she is 100% a Slanesh worshipper, completely corrupted, yada, yada, yada. I have always found that to be the weaker interpretation of her, as indeed Age of Sigmar, as they develop her in a different direction in many respects, also disses. The general belief that she is an elf that is willing to use anything and has extraordinary contacts through and control of Slanesh works perfectly for me, and using Slanesh corruption for her own ends 100% works for me. Dark elves in general use whatever they can to get the success they're looking for and care little about anyone else.
Yep. And the last one, good day, chats. Why did the writers stop Chaos Elgi? Seems like a slam dunk with elaborate models. What is Decala's relation with other Chaos Elves? We kind of mentioned that, talked about it, where elves used to mutate very easily. So you would see them all over the place, and then Games Workshop kind of clenched down on that. However, something that I think we can actually use this as a jumping point into just getting going. One of the things that's really interesting is that they didn't completely abandon the concept in later editions. One of the most notable examples that would tie directly into Dechala, but we don't get to see it, are the Anointed. Which the Anointed are really, we've talked about them in a prior stream. They are one of the scariest fucking things you could ever run into, being that they are incredibly powerful elves who allowed themselves to be possessed by some manner of demon.
It's not that. There's no possession at all. If you go to the core description of them inside Storm of Chaos, they're just ancient elves that fell to chaos. That's it. Worth checking in there. Yeah, go check check the Storm of Chaos books. I could be wrong.
Either way,
maybe in the Darkness Rising book they might have added something extra from Black Library, so I can't remember what's in Darkness Rising off the top of my head. But I'm pretty convinced the original Storm of Chaos book doesn't have any possession. So check that while I'm going, and I'll add a little bit of extra detail for the Anointed. The Anointed were put in place by Gav Thorpe for the Storm of Chaos summer campaign, and it was super fun. And an entire Slanesh force of goodness, nastiness was added there. And these are ancient elves who have fallen to chaos, but because they're elves, they do not mutate. Instead, their eyes dilate like mental. Their eyes are completely black. Their skin sometimes becomes almost translucent because their body is almost thrumming with chaotic energies. But again, they're not properly mutating. And further, occasionally, their skin might be a slightly different shade or hue, depending on where you go. But that's about it as far as it comes to mutations. And they kick ass in chew gum.
Yeah, and he's right. It's that I read a word and my brain assumed or filled in some words that weren't there, but they have the power of creatures demonic.
Damn straight.
So the thing is that they're basically as powerful as many demons.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are super big, scary, horrible things.
Yeah, they are. And they
look like elves. But just like Andy said, they have like weird skin tones and stuff.
Now, you might find that a lot of them have taken on scarification or hair removal or whatever they can do that might make them differentiate from standard elves. But some of them still look like normal elves, except for their crazy eyes.
I do like the skin thing of some of them are translucent and blue tinged, while others have entirely ebony flesh.
Yeah, I used that as a starting point for a creation in one of my own games for Hegelian the Black, who was an ancient anointed who was like 7,000 years old and was known for taking on armies almost by himself because elf bullshit. It's fair to say that the anointed are almost the peak example of what elf bullshit can become, in the same way that avatars are in some respect the peak examples of what elves can become. So there are ones who have fallen, and it's an entirely Slaanesh thing.
Yeah, so the thing that's really interesting about them that we really want to tie in on before we launch into Dechala specifically is that these are elves that for thousands and thousands of years have dedicated themselves to Slaanesh, explored the absolute depths of sensation and excess and all this stuff, and yet, like Andy pointed out, they haven't mutated at all. Like, at most, their skin color has a little bit, but other than that, they are perfectly normal looking. Even though they have chaos armor and they make regular elves look like a joke. Like they are horrifyingly good stat wise and power wise, and come with all sorts of nasty upgrades. Yet, Dechala, who is just as old as they are, is a horrific monstrosity by comparison.
Yeah, and I'll also add probably, because Dechala is someone who does have a background that we could take in different directions, because most of the core facts that we have about her are very simple, and all the rest is unreliable narrator. So the background that we have for Dechala is not certain, is not given the god voice that you often get with many Warhammer examples, and I personally think that is to the betterment for the character. Now, obviously, when she eventually arrives in Total War, which she will, of that I've got almost no doubt, could be wrong. But when she eventually arrives over there, it's very likely they will attempt to do the thing that you have to do when you introduce a new character, which is, who is she? And they will calcify her background. And they will move from saying this is an unreliable story, probably to this is who she is. And they will almost certainly go with the Liber Chaotica version, which we're going to get to. Because the Liber Chaotica version is pretty much as close to what is now considered to be the canonical version as you can get. Indeed, if you go over to the wiki claims over the Warhammer side that it is her background. The wiki's wrong here. And I'd just like to say in general, because I do like to call this out frequently, the wiki is often deeply, deeply, deeply wrong. It is not written by the writers. It is written by people who read the sections and go, oh, that looks about right. And then they write it in their own words or just copy paste bits. But they often miss significant sections. So don't necessarily rely on the wiki if you're out there thinking, oh, I'd like to read up on this. But it is a really good source to give you a good direction for each thing.
Yeah, they tend to struggle with context pretty heavily, which, to be fair, is easy to do. So, Dechala.
Let's start in the 5th edition, because that seems to be an obvious place to begin.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of where Dechala came from.
Yeah. So in 5th edition, Dechala is given a single piece of artwork that's actually really fun, which I'll show to y'all here in just a second. And she is also, basically, her story is detailed over about 6 paragraphs. And it uses a lot of like mays and possiblies. It doesn't like completely nail it down, but there's her artwork. Her OGR, super duper pretty. And Dechala is talked about that the things that's known about her is that she's been roaming around the world for at least centuries, terrorizing and causing all sorts of problems and being a nasty chaos champion of Slaanesh. Like Andy said, the biggest, baddest champion of Slaanesh.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that in her original story, she is, although she is called Dechala the Denied One, it does not explain why she's called the Denied One. It's just her title, but there's literally no mention of it whatsoever. All it basically says is that it is believed that she is an elf that originates from Ulthuan, but that is, it says like possibly, and then basically just dives into her mutations, of some of her personality quirks, and essentially her fighting style. Like it's all very chop, 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 with essentially a paragraph dedicated to each. Now, her mutations are really interesting. If you do believe that she's an elf, which I would say is pretty solid, as most things agree on that at least, she is, even by human standards, horrifically mutated. She has the lower body of a large serpent, at the end of which is what appears to be essentially like a scorpion stinger. And then she has 6 arms, each of which carries a blade, unless we talk about some of her alternate designs, which we'll get into a little later, because these show up at the Liber Chaotica, where the author actually did some really fun exploration on what she could be. But what's really fascinating about her is, beyond the fact that she's extremely venomous, she produces venom from her tail, from her fangs, and her blades are coated in venom. One of the things I adore about her is that you can actually see the beginnings of a character that would be developed later, known as the Mask, where Dechala dances. Her form of fighting is described as a sinuous dance that when you would play with her in tabletop, when she get into combat, you would pick one of 3 dances that she would do, and depending on the dance she's doing, she would get different special rules. Which some of them were absolutely bonkers, where she could have the dance, the dagger dance, where she ignores the first 3 attacks that hit her in close combat, which is fucking bullshit.
It is proper bullshit. If you ever played Warhammer, you will know that means that she is pretty much close to indestructible.
She's already weapon skill 8.
She's already weapon skill 8. Yeah, totally. Just stat-wise, as just a small addendum to that, she is exceedingly capable, but a bit of a glass cannon, in that she's only given 2 wounds. She can be killed relatively easily. Your average character, if it lands a hit on her, tends to kill her. But for those of you who know anything about Warhammer, the landing the hit part is much harder you might think, particularly because she has initiative 10 as well, and she's going to be heading first on everything, right up to the greater demons of Khorne themselves. She is a little bitty capable, and I super enjoyed playing with her on the battlefield, even though the model was deeply, deeply poo.
Yeah, the other things that's really interesting about her that they set up in this early version, which is fairly simple, other than talk about, they believe that she's an elf from Ulthuan, she's very heavily mutated, that she is, the thing that they do give you a hint about what the Denied One may refer to is that she, very interestingly, views mortality as a shackle. She views the physical, which is, for how few words they're using to express her character, then move on, opens a huge can of what is going on with this person, of that you have someone that views the material realm as a prison, which is a very interesting and unusual relationship for a character to have with the world in Warhammer Fantasy. Like, there's very few characters that tend to take that level of an approach to things.
Yeah, it's good. So there's a few things that we can say about her. Number one, she, at the point of Warhammer 5th edition, which is pretty much, if you're looking for timeline, about 5 minutes before the end of the world. So who does she count as we move into the end times? She leads the most powerful Slaanesh warband in the world. It's called, at this point, the Tormentors. And the Tormentors have her at the lead, and there is nothing that comes close to her when you're looking at the Slaaneshi troops. She is at peak champion, and there's a reason she's peak champion. She has done literally everything over centuries plus and has somehow never ascended. She has somehow never become a demon prince. Now, if you've ever played any of the older Path to Ascension, Road to Chaos, various different games that Games Workshop have tickled with at the side of their many Warhammer products, you'll know that becoming a demon prince is nothing more than winning a few battles, getting a few positive mutations, beating up another Chaos champion, and oink, away you go. Demon Prince, a go-go. It's not so hard. I mean, it's pretty hard. Most of them die. And you have to win a lot. She's been doing this for century after century after century, and she has not ascended. There's another couple of details that are worth pointing out. Number one, she has a big scar on her face, and this was given to her by a Chaos Champion of Khorne. So she hates all Khornate troops. And indeed, if you're doing any of your big... This is one of the things that really upset me about the end times, by the way. If you're doing any of your big battles where you have multiple different chaos types, she cannot be fielded in the same force as a Khornate champion. Will never be beside them, absolutely despises them. So if you're an end times writer and you're thinking of what to do with her, having her tag team with Arbal the Undefeated absolutely makes sense. Indeed, that's what they did. But let's push that aside.
Don't need this garbage.
So we're given that classic Slaaneshi thing of beauty being marred, which again says something about how she views her mutations. Her mutations, if indeed mutations they are a blessing. These are something that she absolutely dwells with. Her beauty is described here, at least, as something that is both utterly beguiling, but also deeply disturbing. It's something that people can't help but look at and go, oh, but at the same point, they're like, oh. Classic Slaanesh. It's not just simply one thing. It revolves around the core concepts of what beauty are and how it manifests within the material realm.
Yeah, one of the things I find really interesting is that her design, which I'll show you all some of her more modern designs that were added in the Liber Chaotica, but she's a character that actually, she, in my opinion, is one of the rare times where an artist landed on a design that I can go, yeah, I could see that being beguiling while also horrifying simultaneously. Especially in the modern age where, and I say this somewhat flippantly, but not, but I do mean it with a gem of core truth, where in kind of the modern zeitgeist, for a lot of people that are on the internet and participate in like culture and things like that, the concept of finding monsters that conventionally would be considered horrifying, genuinely attractive, has become a very popular concept. Very popular concept, and Dechala slots really well into that. If anything, she was actually kind of ahead of her time by a good 30 years, which is impressive. Good for her.
Yeah, totally. There's another thing, a couple of things worth pointing out too. The art, for all Sotek likes it, I'm less of a fan for, but for a specific reason. And that's that it absolutely doesn't show the core of her character, which is a great, for want of a better word, dancer. Her movements are sinuous and lithe as she moves from one place to the next, as she can wrap her way around anything and entrance and beguile, utterly missing from the art, which just makes it look like she's coming forward. Swords are ready.
The Liber Chaotica art, not this art.
Oh, okay. No, that's fair. It's also worth noting that the art inside her original 5th edition version makes it 100% clear that she was an elf. There's no doubt. Look at the weapons that she's carrying. If you look at the original art, even her face is drawn in the same way that they used to do elven faces, with the eyes at a slant, the longer face. The weapons that she's carrying have got elven cuts, elven gems, and pretty much if you've played Eldar or elves, you will see similar shapes being used throughout. You can almost hear in the background Jez Goodwin going, no, do it in that shape because that's the shape that it should be, or the artist in hand here just copying Jez Goodwin's basic artwork that we use to create many of what we understand to be elder and elf shapes and icons. So we have ourselves already a very clear, very, very clear description of an elven, probably princess, who has fallen to chaos, who has a big, long, snaky tail and a barb, has 6 arms, yet is still oddly, stunningly beautiful. I think there's also one other point which is worth noting, which Sotek has already discussed when he was laying her out, and that's that she coats her weapons. Now, we said already that she coats her weapons with her elixir of damnation, where if you get cut at all with this, and it's made of various fluids, I don't think I need to say much more, on top of warpstone and various other things, but it's concocted. It's actually concocted. Yeah. So this is something that she has created. So we get an aspect of her character here that is perhaps otherwise not detailed. And that's that she is, let's take a quick moment, an apothecary of sorts. She is somebody She is someone who has mixed and matched various parts of the material realm to create outcomes, which means that she is your classic witch standing over a cauldron. So she has got an aspect to her character that is hinted here, but is not necessarily spelled out. Now, you could argue that she somehow ingests warpstone and then creates fluids through various acts that makes her elixir.
Yeah, they so in the original version, it doesn't detail her poison, but the Liber Chaotica, the author goes deep on the poison.
Yeah, indeed. So we're going to go into this in as we go to the next section. But at the moment, we've got ourselves what is probably something like a fallen elf princess who was once possibly even a healer, possibly a magic user, possibly something else that used concoctions to some end. So we've got a core here, was maybe a fighter, but might not have been originally, was maybe something else, but might not have been. And over the course of probably thousands of years, has become Slaaneish's core champion in the material realm, leading the largest warband that Slaanesh has ever had, and likely preparing for good old Archaon to say, come over here, Dechala, it's time to take on the world. So it's a pretty cool character. She's also got a scar from Core. She's a pretty cool character, and this is where she's left off in 5th edition. And as far as the Warhammer game is concerned, this is where she stops. She's never mentioned again, pretty much inside Core Warhammer. She's not really used in the end times, except for, I think it's one novel reference.
And even then, she's only in a side novel. If you just got the 5 big books, you never see her.
You'd miss her entirely, even though her deeds inside that novel are extraordinary. And also her death is pretty damn sad. And other than that, we have just the Liber Chaotica. I think that's about it.
Yep. All right, we're going to get caught up on Super Chats real quick.
Super Chats, yeah.
And we already did this one. Would the new Age of Sigmar Slaanesh stuff work in the old world? Could it? Absolutely, yes. Will Games Workshop allow it to? Right now, absolutely not. GW is
seems to be the case.
They are keeping them very, very separate at the moment. I hope that policy will change when we get into later editions. But we'll see what happens. She was denied her proper place as an important and cool character who happens to be female in the story of Warhammer.
I mean, it's harsh, laughing god. It's harsh, but it's true.
Not wrong.
Yeah, there's I can say firsthand that there is a lot of unconscious bias with those who are doing the writing, and it's entirely unconscious. When, for example, they're given a choice of 4 things, they go for the one that they think is coolest, and it's generally always the man, because unconsciously that matches what they think Warhammer is or fighting is or whatever. And often you will find that female characters entirely sidelined. And just as a single example, I'm not going to name names, I was building something, and I asked for parity between gender and expression, and I got 90% men. And that was with them thinking that they had gone not 50-50, sitting at maybe 40-40 plus others. And that was their desperate attempt to be equal. And they thought they'd been equal, and they had just failed. And when it was pointed out, they were bewildered. They were certain that they'd been equal.
Yeah, there's actually a genuinely interesting thing where if you go back to 5th edition, especially, which had a lot of special characters, they're all over the place. If you read through all of the various 5th edition books, and then you go to the later editions, any of them, 6th, 7th, and 8th, there is actually a significant number of female characters that show up in 5th that just vanish. And are essentially replaced by male counterparts in the later edition. Because 6th edition cut them all down to about 2 characters per faction instead of like 12, and then slowly ramped back up in 7th and 8th. But they completely got rid of them. I mean, like, we lost like all of the Dwarf Queen characters. We lost the Dechala. We lost a lot of elf characters. Like a lot of the lady characters just whoop straight out the window, which was it's just interesting.
And for me, who is when we're looking at species like elves or chaos stuff, or whatever, they really don't care one way or the other what gender you may or may not have. It literally doesn't matter at all. The characters that could have been used, there's no reason why they couldn't have been a bit broader, but they unconsciously chose not to do so. I don't in any way say that they wanted to do that.
Oh yeah,
that was never the express purpose, but it's just there was a lack of thought when they looked at the final products and they went, what have we built?
nobody took a step back and went, let's make sure we look at this from a distance. They were too in it. But they're doing better nowadays. They're doing better nowadays. Jaguar Philosopher, do you think she gets a redesign like Azazel in Total War? So. Definitely. I think that's
I hope so.
100%. Because the thing is that the model they have to work with is so old to the point that it just wouldn't be functional. They would, knowing Creative Assembly and having actually sat in to see their process, what they would likely do is they would take her original art, look at the Liber Chaotica art, and then look at a bunch of Slaanesh designs that have come out since, like for demons and champions and stuff, and try and create something that has the inspiration of the original artwork, but modernizes a lot of the concepts. Like if you go look at Skull Taker, or sorry, not Skull Taker, we haven't seen him yet. Karanak. Karanak's a good example where they used an older model, but they updated various aspects of it to make it look a lot better. Same thing for what's his face? The High Priest of Hashut. Astrogoth Ironhand. They took a really stupid looking design in Mini and made something really, really nice out of it. So I would expect something similar for Dechala. Cobalt, on Dekhala's design. I don't know how familiar you all are with Dungeons & Dragons Pathfinder stuff. Yeah, we actually, there was someone who super chatted this earlier, but she is the spitting image of the classic Marilyn Demon/Monster. Yeah,
she absolutely is. And as I said back earlier in the stream, I think that it's very unlikely that she wasn't the source for that. Having said that, I personally think that is, out of everything, the best reason why, if Total War take this character, they should sit down and redesign it, not to change it, but to make it a unique Warhammer thing, rather than something that looks like it's just been copy-pasted from someone else's
head. That's actually one of the things which I'll show you all in a moment, why I like the Liber Chaotica redesigns so much, is that they really made her look more like a mutant, as opposed to just something from another IP. Which happened a lot. Cameo. So far in Fantasy 40K, I've seen elves associated with Slaanesh only. Are there any elven characters associated with the other three Chaos Gods? I will say that specific characters, none that jump to my mind. However, if you delve into a lot of the Black Library books or even the roleplay series, you will bump into elves that have relationships with the other Chaos Gods. They're rare, but as a good example, if you actually get the starter set for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay,
that's what I was about to mention.
Yeah, you can get a really nasty scenario involving some elves of Nurgle. That is a whole thing.
So, this is something that does happen in World, and it's something that has been described in several places on the lowdown, as in elves can fall, or more accurately, can choose to follow the other chaos powers if they wish to do so. There is the inevitable issues with what happens with their soul afterwards if Slaanesh comes along and gobbles it up, which I think is an interesting theological argument to have in the world, not outside, because outside you can't really answer it. But in World, they can believe they have answers, true or no. But I was told when I was putting it all together, the Warhammer version of it for Fantasy Roleplay, that elves were not anything but Slaanesh. So I being me, went bollocks to that. I don't think that's true. Let's sit down and make some elves worshipping a god that you might not expect. So we went with Nurgle ones, and I presented a pretty horrific version of exactly how that could manifest. Remembering again that your Nurgle worshippers that are elves don't mutate. They fall in a very different way. So they can appear as pure as unsullied sunshine, while in fact they are the most horrific entities, in this case, birthing even worse. So yeah, it's proper horrible.
Yep. And this is very true. If you actually read the Orion trilogy, the whole trilogy is kicked off by a very particular character who is an elf that has fallen to Nurgle. That is actually really well written. She's a really interesting character. Because she falls to Nurgle in a way you might not expect, which is particularly fun. Are the Anointed too strong for Wolfrip?
No.
Like, could you have them appear? Yeah. Could a party take them? No.
I'm going to be perhaps slightly controversial in my answer here, and that's that the current designers of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay don't really understand the top end of the game. They don't understand how to handle high stats. And the system was designed around being able to accommodate everything that Warhammer offers. And that's everything from a tiny little rat at the bottom up to something like Archeon himself, hopping along and doing his Archeon business. Yeah, I found most of the stats for the top end things that they've produced have been super, super weak in comparison to what they almost certainly should be in comparison to PCs. So, could the system handle it? Yes. Would that sit at the top end of what the system offers? Yes. Would the current designers stat them the way I would stat them? Almost certainly no. They'd make them much weaker, meaning that the Anointed would be very easily handled by your average PC party, even if they made them as strong as some of the more powerful characters that they've so far produced in the book since I left that job. So broadly, yes, across the board, but be aware if they get official stats, they'll probably be quite weak.
Yeah, I would always give the advice that I think Andy himself said to me once, of that if you want to make a scary bad guy, then like take how much XP your PCs have been getting over a given length of time, and then apply that mathematics to how long that character's been kicking about, and watch it get really fucking ridiculous, really fucking fast.
Yeah, true fact.
Like most of their stats are going to be in the 100s. They're going to be really scary.
They're going to be really scary.
So anyway, with that, let's jump into
Liber Chaotica.
Liber Chaotica, which took the character and really made it into something special. Now, I am going to be a little blunt that the Liber Chaotica story is dark. It's one of the darkest stories I've ever read in Warhammer Fantasy. It has some pretty nasty themes to it, so it's not like super horrible as far as like the worst things I've ever seen, but like just a little warning that Dechala goes through some shit to become what she is.
Yeah, absolutely worth pointing out. It's also worth pointing out that this story and what we're going to be discussing here concerning Dechala, because it's really one story and the hint at another story, and then a description that there's a bajillion other stories on top of that. But this story is not her story. It might be her story. This could be what happened to her, but it is expressly and written into the text that this is definitely not her story. It's just the story that they had heard, and it's a combination of multiple different tales into one potential narrative. So this means that not only do we get a pretty cool story for who she was, that the character is relatively mysterious, but it also means that if you've got your own games out there, you can easily take her in a different direction and not contradict the actual lore as it's presented. And that's kind of cool. And in some respects, I think is, as I said earlier, one of the places where Warhammer shines.
Yeah, and I think what me and Andy will likely do very much this stream, because we'll have time for it, to be frank, is that we're going to be probably talking about filling in various gaps and what could be, what could be some side possibilities besides what the author is presenting. Because another thing that you'll note about the story that we're about to tell is that it kind of, you would expect it to be from Dechal's perspective, sort of, but it's not. It's actually from another character's perspective. Yep. So one of the things the Liber Chaotica did is that it really, it was kind of like Warhammer 4th roleplay edition, where it took a bunch of different stories and kind of coalesced them to try and make the Warhammer world feel more cohesive, which is super fun and great. And the Dechala story focuses on a particular demon prince who, if you've only read like 6th, 7th, and 8th edition, you've probably never heard of. But if you look at anything before that, he is really important. And that is the demon prince Samael, or Samuel, or I like to say Samael because it sounds more spooky and demonic. But he is the big bad for Slaaneish's demon princes. Like, don't get me wrong, Azazel's cool, but Azazel's only been kicking around for about 2,500 years. Samael is one of the earliest. He is kind of vaguely implied. It doesn't say it, but it's implied that he could very well be the first ever demon prince of Slaanesh.
Yep.
And he is a piece of work. Samael is a fucking nasty character. Just to note some things about him as we're getting into it is that Samael is credited. There's a really fun story in the Liber Chaotica about the incubi and succubi of Warhammer Fantasy, which a lot of people go, "Oh, I didn't know those exist." Well, yes, they do. And the story is basically about how there was a group of Slaanesh demons that wanted to know, they wanted to stay in the mortal realm to enjoy all of its various sensations and its pleasures and its sufferings without ever having to risk being banished back to the ether. They wanted to become truly material. And Samael was so powerful that this demon prince, they came to him and said, we want to be part of the material plane forever. And he looked at them and said, all right, I will tell you how to do this. I will give you the instructions on how to go from being demons to being truly material beings, which is bonkers as a concept. And he walks them through this process where they get a cult going amongst the humans, and the humans perform this really elaborate ritual where they get possessed, and then the possessed people have children, and the children are born essentially without souls, and the demons kind of like move into these empty husks of children, and it allows them to become material with Samael's blessings. But Samael knew something they didn't. In the eternal jokes of the way making demons deals with demons, even with other demons, is a bad idea, which is that Samael, they did not realize that they became truly material beings, which means they were no longer immortal. So while they were very, very powerful, the incubi and the succubi, most of them were tracked down and killed by early humanity. Now, as Warhammer World goes, some escaped and some are still out there to this day, and they are really big boogeymen of some Sigmarite teachings, because they're the ultimate tempters of, good, honest Sigmarite men and women. But that the fact that Samael could supposedly do this, which I would say is he did it, indicates that this is a being of nightmarish tiers of power. I mean, that is like, he is taking fundamental laws as we understand them about like how the material and the immaterial interact, and is going, I'm going to tweak that, which is fascinating as a concept.
Yeah. I like the character. There's a lot going for it. I have my own theories.
Yeah. He also shows up in Warhammer. Fun fact.
Yeah.
I won't tell you when. You'll just have to watch the show and see when he shows up.
Very different iteration of him.
Yeah, he's fun though. He's very fun. And actually plays a very key role. But so the thing that we definitely need to just note about him is that this is one of the strongest demon princes of Slash, and he's one of the first. And this is a character who is so powerful, and he is so knowledgeable, to put it bluntly, about how the material and the immaterial interact, that it would, I think, be fair to suggest he was likely, possibly, like an elven mage or something.
Okay, I'm just going to run with it. Okay, quite clearly, he was a freaking elf. Okay, look at the name, Sam-I-L. Okay, just change the spelling ever so slightly to an E-L-L-E, and you've got a classic elven name. Okay, it's just a different transliteration of Elfarine. He's quite clearly an elf. He was quite clearly a fallen elf. Quite clearly, probably a peer of Bel-Akor. Okay, Bel-Akor, as we know, Bel-Kahardras, in fact, all the bells of we were discussing in our previous Phoenix King stream, was also probably an elf, and he was probably the very first to fall. And given the story that we're about to have about Samael and Dechala, we have a very clear elf-facing demon prince. An elf, not only an elf-facing one, but one obsessed with a particular elf, Dechala, and a particular elf for probably a very strong reason. So we have got ourselves a demon prince who probably comes from the Cataclysm, who was probably an elf, and who almost certainly is very closely tied to Dechala, which I think is a perfect time to say Dechala is tied to, I think this might be a surprise, Samael.
Yeah, so here's how the story goes, and then I have some crackpot theories in my head that I'm going to start throwing out every which way, and we're going to talk about them. So the way the legend goes, and remember, this is not necessarily or even likely what completely happened. This is simply the details as this character understands from a monolith that he's reading. Like, he spirit walks through the realms of chaos, and he finds a monolith to call, and he's literally reading the story.
Just as a small aside there, if you don't know what monoliths are, across the Chaos Waste, there's a host of big, huge pillars or shrines or otherwise recordings of the greatest deeds of the greatest chaos champions who have generally ascended or for other reasons been recorded for posterity. And this particular monolith is a big, long, pale marble monolith wrapped around with silks and velvets, as I recall, all neatly inscribed with her deeds. And that by itself is super fascinating, because normally this is reserved for those who have achieved some form of ascension. It's reserved for those who are literally the best. So that immediately places her in the pantheon of the demon princes without necessarily even being one. And that again reiterates her position to Slaanesh as a whole. She is an important figure.
Yes. So with that, we have that Dechala, which very uniquely for Champions That Fall to Chaos, supposedly is her actual original name. That her name does not change after she falls, though usually their names change when they become demon princes, so that makes sense. But Dechala was an elf who lived in Naggareth. And if you remember from prior streams that we talked about, Naggareth was the kingdom of Anarion. It is where he set up his court after he draws the Sword of Cain. And one of the things that's talked about in Decala's story is about that Anarion's court is active in Naggareth at this time. So this is in the last few decades of the Cataclysm. And as the demons of chaos are rampaging around Ulthuan, while Anarion is kicking ass and chewing bubblegum, he cannot be everywhere at once. And there are places where the demons will achieve victories by getting around him. And Dechala, who is the daughter of Antorialis, I think his name is, who is a prince of Naggareth and a associate of Anarion. So this is a big badass who probably rode a dragon and was super scary and super cool.
I can so.
His daughter, Dechala, was extremely beautiful. Now, what's interesting is that I like that the author does not say, like, oh, she's the most beautiful elf. She's just a fairly pretty elf. And the demon prince Samael, who is out there fighting alongside the legions of Nakari and a bunch of other crazy-ass demons, is obsessed with her. And like, it's not that he's like, oh, she's kind of pretty. He is obsessed with Dechala, which, you know, Slaanesh is all about obsession. But he takes such a ridiculous fancy to her that he decides that he wants her, but he wants her in a particular way. He could, the story once again showing off how scary he is, he could easily go into her home, kill everyone, take her for himself, but he doesn't, because that's not good enough for him. He wants to make a game out of it. He wants her to choose to be his, not simply to be taken by him. So he sets about a very elaborate scheme where he basically just terrorizes her and her family by targeting anyone and everyone that gets near to them, messing with them psychologically, messing with them emotionally, killing their pets, killing their allies, killing their friends, but he doesn't touch her or her family. He just terrorizes them, quite literally. And he terrorizes them for weeks upon weeks. They try moving, he follows them. They try hiding, he finds them. They try.
I think it might even be years, not even weeks. It's because it's long enough that those who are on the receiving end are said to have gone literally insane. They have been broken, and all around have been broken. And continually throughout all of this, Samael is coming forward and saying, "Give me your daughter. Give me her. Go on, just give her to me. Just give her to me, and this all goes away. Come on, pass her over. Pass her over. I want her."
Yeah, so he keeps approaching Prince Antorialis, and like Andy said, tells him, this will stop if you just give me your daughter. That's all you got to do. Like demonic pact. No strings. Just give me your daughter, and all this torture will end.
Now, you might sit in the receiving end of hearing this tale and go, yeah, that doesn't sound very likely. I mean, you'd never trust that. And you could argue on one side that, yes, you wouldn't. And the reason that the bargain that is to come was made was because they had gone insane. But I would also argue that it's mentioned in many places that demons as etheric entities, and this includes the demon princes themselves, they follow certain rules in the same way that the material realm has rules. To fly, you generally need wings or magic. You can't just fly. That's not how the material realm works. It's got its own rules. The immaterial realm, the realm of the gods, the aether, whatever you wish to call it, also has rules. And parts of those rules is when certain things are laid down in a particular way, they are immutable and cannot be changed, which is why many, many, many wizards will attempt to make deals with demons, because if you can get that deal marked down correctly, and you can word it in such a fashion using the material words in such a way that there's no loophole, you can get extreme power. Many demonologists use this to their own ends. So making a deal with a demon is not as stupid as it sounds. Well, simultaneously, it's really, really stupid. Really stupid. But
your lore law needs to be very good.
You have to be really clever. But you got to remember that not all demons are clever in return. Not all of them are immensely smart, although one feels that Samael probably was smarter than your average bear.
Yeah. So, spoiler, as you may all have guessed, Antorialis at the just completely wit's end, beyond it, far beyond it, finally caves and agrees to give his daughter over to Samael, despite the fact that she is literally throwing herself at his feet and begging him, crying, screaming, not for her own family, to turn her over to the demon that's been terrorizing them for years. You know, it's not like she doesn't know what kind of entity Samael is. The elves are keenly aware who Samael is, and as is she. But her family gives her to the demon prince. And he takes her, and at this point, you may think, oh, like, you know, he tortures her. Not yet. Instead, Samael brings her to him, and he, using his words, the venom of his words, goes essentially the equivalent of, wow, that must have really hurt. That is so terrible how your family betrayed you. That is truly awful. Don't you think you deserve some justice? Don't you think you deserve to be able to be the right in this situation? And he basically gives her a weapon and says, you can do what you want. And between her terror of him, because she knows what he's implying, and between her terror and her also being on the brink of insanity, he basically lets her go, and she goes to her home and she butchers her entire household. She kills everybody.
Yeah, I quite like this story. And I quite like this story, not because it's horrific and all the rest of it, but if you consider the timing of it all, the Chaos Gods do like to be fickle and mean. I really like pitching this right at the very end. At the very, very end of the whole cataclysm, as in, if her father had just held out for an extra day, an extra 5 days, an extra 10 days, or whatever, then it would have come to an end. Samael couldn't reach them because the magic that's permeating the world would have been ripped out by the vortex.
Oh, I love that.
Really making it,
longer.
if anything, just a bit worse. And then, only then, would it have been game over. But he didn't reach that long. And instead, as the vortex is slowly but surely going up, she comes tearing in and tears her family an absolutely new one.
So after this, she experiences, because Samael played it well, that she experiences such a release of escaping that terror, of being the victim for years, being this, not, I wouldn't say like, oh, frail, helpless elven princess, but like a daughter who has seen everyone around her suffering and has dealt with the resentment of knowing that if they just gave her over, it would be over. The torture would be over. And elves, much like people, under enough torture, they don't act rationally. They're going to do horrible things, say horrible things. She's going to be assuming horrible things, even if they're not necessarily true. And she's finally freed from this in an exultant moment of bloodshed. And she likes it. She likes it a lot. And she chooses to stay by Samael's side, which is the really important part of her character at this point, is that she makes a choice to stay by his side.
Classic elven stuff. It's also worth noting that we have a third party that comes in at this point that changes the entire nature of the relationship also. And that's Slaanesh itself. Because Slaanesh, upon seeing Dechala unleashed, goes, yep, that's my girl.
It's mighty excessive.
I like that. That's
pretty awesome. There.
You already get an example of what she was probably like. She was coming in there, swirling, dancing, mayhem, murder. The character that she was going to be is already established, probably in these early parts, and maybe even beforehand. It's very easy to say she was a winsome princess, but the truth of that probably isn't the story being told here, because she is hideously effective at taking out one of the strongest lieutenants of Anarion. Let's be blunt here. Let's actually take a moment to consider what the story doesn't say. The story sort of says, oh, and she kills her dad and her cousins and her friends and everybody. And then take a moment to step back and go, what does that mean? She takes out some of the most powerful elves that Nagarath has by herself.
Yeah,
finally unleashed. So it suggests that there's definitely something bigger going on behind the picture that isn't being told by the story. But she does all of this, and Slaanesh goes, well done, my girl, and marks her, giving her the actual mark of Slaanesh, the divine mark that says that your god is watching over you and has claimed you for perpetuity. That changes things for their relationship significantly, because Samael liked being in control.
Yeah. So this is where we get Andy, do your camera refocus thing.
Oh,
there you go. There you go. Much better. I like being able to see your face. So one of the things that's interesting here is that the story says something that I think is not necessarily true, but for the sake of the teller that's reading this monolith, implies some really interesting things, which is that, first of all, we know that Dechala flees Ulthuan. That she basically, realizing that she is on the losing team side because the vortex has just gone up, while the demons are just kind of vanishing. She actually has to get out of there. She does, and she flees to the north. And that the story says that Samael shapes and melds Dechala to a form that he finds pleasing, as she is his wife, because they do get married. They're full on. And according to the tale, he shapes her into all of the various mutations that she has and makes her into the creature that she is. I would suggest this is probably not entirely true. While Samael certainly has the capabilities of doing it, I would suggest that over the thousands of years that have passed, it's probably a more complex story than that. But it does make the story that this teller is telling a lot faster and simpler. But like Andy said, then a change happens, which is that Dechala, because Samael, if anything, he sold her a little too good on the path of Slaanesh, and she goes in. And Slaanesh just keeps getting impressed and impressed and impressed, and keeps showering her with affection, showering her with gifts and blessings and power. And eventually, Samael starts to get a little jealous, because if there's one thing that most Slaanesh followers have in common, it's that they do not share being Slaanesh's favorite very well. That is a prime position that the followers of Slaanesh bicker over like you would not believe. Which, granted, all the Dark Gods kind of have that going with a lot of their followers, but Slaanesh followers are very envious, even compared to their fellows. And some
a little bit like how Khorne is often very angry. They tend to be focused on similar types of emotions when you're following one of those gods.
But Samael looks over at Dechala, and Dechala, according to her myth, gets one of the most badass lines that I love, which is that instead of him rebuking her, she approaches him and says, my love, our relationship must change because I am not your subordinate. I am your equal. And as your equal, I should ascend.
Take a moment to consider what this means. Actually, let's take a moment, because she says bluntly, I am your equal to a demon prince. She says, I will no longer be beneath you because I'm your equal. And this is before ascension, before anything else. She says, I am beloved by Slaanesh and I am your equal. There's a story here. There is definitely some form of story here that is yet to properly be delved into, I think. And I think it's super fascinating, because to claim you're equal to a demon prince and to somehow have the demon prince not immediately kill you or stop you or do anything else, at this point, she just goes, that's it, I'm done. I'm out of here, mic drop, and goes to the Chaos Wastes. And Samael is pissed. I mean, proper pissed. So pissed, in fact, he doesn't pursue her. He doesn't chase after her. He doesn't try to stop her. He doesn't do anything. Why, you might ask? The first answer is the obvious one, which is the vortex has gone up and he now has a problem directly influencing her. However, I think still, he's a demon prince, and if she goes to the Chaos Waste, demon prince can stalk many parts of the Chaos Waste. So the answer here clearly can't just simply be that alone. But we do have an answer according to this story, what he does. Such is his inability to do anything to her, he turns to Slaanesh directly. He doesn't go to her. He just goes to Slaanesh and goes, "Holy Slaanesh, give us a hand with me, wife. My wife isn't doing what I'm telling her to. I'm deeply upset about this. Seriously, dude, this is unacceptable. I'd like you to step in and just sort out my marriage. Will you do that for me, mate?"
I love that. So Samael, one of the most powerful demon princes we know of in the setting, runs into a big marital problem and goes,
"Help! Help me, Dad! Come on in! My wife's run away." And basically, he begs Slaanesh to bring her back. "I want her back. She's mine, and she has gone. This is just unacceptable. I want my wife back."
Yeah, and the thing that's really interesting is that he's so, to put it bluntly, petulant. And angry, and is literally saying, like, to Slaanesh, "Retract your gifts from her, bring her back so that I may punish her, so that I may kill her for her disobedience, for not listening to me, for not being a faithful slave," essentially. And Slaanesh does probably the most goated thing Slaanesh has ever done in existence, which is that Slaanesh turns around and says, "How dare you demand anything of me?" And somebody goes, "Oh shit." Oh fuck. And Slaanesh says, "How about I strip away your gifts instead? Would you like that?" And somebody else says, "Nope, I'm sorry." Press nose to floor. "My bad, Dad, Mom, whatever." And Slaanesh says, "No, I will not do this because I love Dechala. I will not force her to come back to you. But such is my tenderness for you, Samael, such that do I love you as one of my greatest demon princes, that I will not only forgive you for your outburst, but I will offer you a compromise, which is that I will never force your wife to come back to you. Instead, as you made her come to you of her own volition, so will I make it where she must come to you of her own volition and submit to you. If she does not, you may never touch her. But so long as you live and you exist, I promise that she will never ascend."
Yeah, no matter the extraordinary nature of her deeds, she will never come to sit by my side because you are the one who claimed her, and I basically grant that. But if she never comes to you, tough shit.
Yeah, which is a really fascinating story that you could write a whole fucking novel about, because it implies it shows Slaanesh in a really interesting light. Of that, in a lot of classic tales, there would be much more of a system of, oh, well, she's your wife, so she's chained to you, she's bound to you, you have the right to demand this authority over her. But Slaanesh says no. Slaanesh enforces you are equals. And while I acknowledge that because you brought her to me, I will grant you this boon, I will do nothing more. And she is free to do as she pleases, because what she does as she pleases me.
Yep. And according to this version of the tale, this is why Dechala never achieves demon princedom. This is also why she's called the Denied One, because she's denied to become a demon princess, or demon prince, if you will. It's a fun wee tale. It gives you an example of a different version of who she could be and how she became what she becomes. And I quite like it. Works nicely.
Yeah, it makes for a fun story. And it also implies a really, like, especially when you're thinking about like a Total War, oh, what would her campaign be about? Like, what's her saga about? The idea that if it's true that the thing she desires more than anything, which the Liber Chaotica reinforces, that she wishes to, as she puts it, break the shackles of law and order to free herself from the prison of the material realm and become something beyond it, that the thing preventing her from doing is her husband, she knows about this pact with Samael. And the thing about it is there's a very specific wording. Slaanesh doesn't say, oh, she has to submit to you in order to become a demon princess. He says, as long as you live. So if something were to happen to Samael, if she could find a way to kill a demon prince, she would ascend.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's a super fun aspect to the story as well. It's also worth noting that this version explains why she's still alive after countless centuries, because she's an elf. It's that simple. She's never going to die under normal conditions, because that's sort of what elves have become by this edition of the game. And that works super nicely. There's another alternative story that's also offered. When I say it's dropped in as there's two tales, there's not two tales. There's like a sentence. And that sentence is simply, she was cursed to immortality.
All right, bye.
She's probably human, maybe cursed to immortality. And that's pretty much it. That's the other romantic tale of Decala's origins. And there's very little else laid there. But again, I think it's worth noting here that the story that's presented here is specifically marked out as being an amalgamation of 12 other tales that all have similar threads. And that there are many more. Oh, yep, you got something you want to say there?
Oh, no, finish your sentence.
Oh, yeah, they've got many more tales about Dechala, which they suggest completely different origins too. So this is just one of the many potential stories that we have for Dechala and where she came from.
Okay, so I'm going to get caught up on Super Chats real quick, then I'll do my...
Okay, that sounds good to me.
Then I have a potentially stupid thing to say.
Oh, I do love, you know how much I love the potentially stupid stuff.
Nightbringer, currently traveling, will need to watch later, but I have the internet. Here's something to show my appreciation for you guys. Oh, well, thank you, Nightbringer.
Oh, thank you so much, Nightbringer. That's super nice.
Yep. Hypothetically speaking, there's nothing stopping demons of any other chaos gods collecting elven souls if they can reach them in time, and if not using them to grow in power, then perhaps using them to broker pacts between them and the demons of Slaanesh. Is there? Yeah.
Hypothetically, yes.
Yeah.
As is often the case when it comes to things involving the aether, rather than the material realm, it's a bit too three-dimensional in terms of thinking about how it works. There's a reason that Slaanesh demons can get elf souls first. It's because when they pop out beside Slaanesh demons. It's not almost so much that you need to find them, it's that they're so close to Slaanesh already that they are pretty much arriving in the realm of Slaanesh, whether they want to or not. So what you're discussing in terms of the three-dimensional side is imagining the realm of chaos as a great battlefield, Khorne taking out most of Slaanesh, so when the elf souls come through, it lives in one of the great fields of Khorne, for example. But loosely speaking, it's not quite as simple as that. It's not a matter of a single demon going, I'm going to go find an elf soul that just seems to be floating around somewhere. It's much, much more fundamental to how the aether itself works. And then mortals later on add stories to try and explain why the demons consume elven souls more than any others. And loosely speaking, it's because the elves are super, super close to Slaanesh. And we sort of know that that's the case, both because of the stuff that's married between Warhammer to 40k to Warhammer to 40k as they bounce back off each other and they've retold each other's tales. Don't think this is 40k coming into Warhammer or Warhammer coming into 40k. This is just the original background used to be the same and they slowly diverged, but the link was never broken. So I would suggest that as much as that is the case, it would require a relatively clever tale and one that probably involved the material realm. So doing something to the soul before it moves on, meaning that the soul itself would not be so immediately plucked by the Slaanesh demons on the other side.
Yeah, that's what I think. That is also why it would lean very heavily into you would need a Slaanesh who has deliberately fallen to another power, because then there's like something gripping them quite literally. Because like Andy said, one of the things that's really interesting is when you read about the elf gods that try to save elf souls, being Loek and Arithkiel, they're described as literally stealing the scraps from Slaanesh's table. Like they literally show up at the last possible second to grab them and run away.
I'd also say, oh yeah, sorry.
Just go. Oh no, you go ahead.
No, you go first. You finish off your bit. I'll do my extra.
Okay, which is to say that, like Andy said, the elven souls are clearly popping up already in Slaanesh's clutches. If their own gods are having to scramble to try and get to them in time.
Yeah. So let's say, for example, we get a soul that's fallen to Khorne. So it falls to Khorne and does all the Khorne stuff. It then does it to an excess that makes even Khorne go, what the fuck? And they arrive with Slaanesh. So even if you fall to one of the other gods, Slaanesh has probably got you anyway, because elves do everything up to 11. They're full of elf bullshit. They don't do things in partial steps. They go to excess in exactly the way that attracts Slaanesh in a way that makes them go, those elven souls, they're just the freaking best because they are us. It's not so much that they're devouring per se. It's just when they die, they become Slaanesh in many respects. It's a complicated setup, and it's not quite so three-dimensional as a demon comes along, eats it, and then moves on. It's a bit more, the Aether is what the Aether is, and they go to Slaanesh.
Very Freckle, this is a really great question I was actually about to talk about a little bit. How does Slaanesh own all elf souls?
I think to a degree we've sort of covered that with some of the answers that we provided there. At its most basic, elves do things to excess even when they shouldn't do. And through doing things to excess, as they move over into the other side, they effectively land in the Aether bit of excess, and Slaanesh is there. They pretty much are Slaanesh. And that in itself is a thing. Yeah, now, if you go for the stories, to finish my point, to go for your stories, it's generally said that the elven souls are especially delicious to Slaanesh demons. And I mean especially so. And Slaanesh itself sits on the outside going, they're all freaking mine. If anyone else touches them, I'm taking you freaking down. And it turns into a core point of war when you move over to the realm of chaos on their side. So the Slaanesh demons claim all elven souls as theirs because they're the tastiest as far as Slaanesh is concerned, and they want to gobble them up. And then you can figure out what that means in terms of the individual wars between the gods and how it actually expresses. But at its most fundamental, it's just that when an elf dies, they sort of land in a place where they effectively are Slaanesh.
Yeah, and I would say that especially if you're exploring from an in-universe perspective, the nice thing is that because we don't have the 40k story of like, oh, the Eldar murder fuck Slaanesh into existence, in fantasy, you get to play around with the idea of where did Slaanesh in particular come from, and why does Slaanesh have this relationship with the elves and with the concept of excess. And the good news is there's no answer to that. You can play around with what is the answer. And if you play around with it, you can come up with some pretty, to be blunt, crackpot theories. That could be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. We were at here. Was the author of the Liber Chaotica watching Jerry Springer? No. I would actually say Jerry Springer drama tends to be way dumber and more bizarre than the Samael Dechala story does.
Which says something.
I will never forget being sick home during like middle school and turned on the TV, and Jerry Springer was the only thing you could watch because I didn't have cable back then. It was local television. It's bizarre TV. Jonathan Scott, Dad, my big titty goth snake waifu wants equality. Yeah,
I think there's underneath it, that's sort of how it's written. But if you actually look at the nature of it, it's not that she wants it; she already had it. And the issue was that Samael could no longer control her. And Samael, when during, say, for example, the Cataclysm, or to begin with, wanted her desperately because of what she was, and effectively got given her by some sort of deal with the family. Strip away all of the characters and what they're doing. A deal is made with the demon that passes her over to it. Yet Samael, upon claiming her, can't control her and expected to be able to do so. So then turns to Slaanesh and says, why can't I control her? She should be mine. And Slaanesh goes, yeah, you know what? No, she's not yours unless she submits, which in many respects, because Slaanesh is a god over in the Aether, the Aether just is an area of pure intent and emotion. It's extremes of everything. Slaanesh is basically stating the state of affairs, rather than necessarily cursing, if we strip away the story again. So basically, Slaanesh is saying, pardon me, you can't control her. The only way to control her is if she submits to you. That's it. That's just how it is. So if you strip away the story of it, the greater demon doesn't understand what's going on, turns to Slaanesh to confirm how the Aether works and the material realm works, and the god says, no, it's an elf. Elves only come to our side when they submit, and she hasn't submitted to you. She submitted to me.
Yeah, I will say, spinning more attention to the story side of it, though, I love the idea that Samael wanted so badly to possess her as like an object, to have something that he could have, yet she ended up being quite literally too much for him. That she was, which is so beautiful and almost in a Slaanesh sense as well, in that she was so excessive that he literally can't contain that. He literally can't control that, which is a really poignant story for a Slaanesh champion, first and foremost, but is also just kind of a fun, I don't know if the author intended it. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because it very much gives off the vibes of this very like domineering male persona of being like, this woman is mine. This is a thing that I own. And her being like, yeah, fuck it, eat it. Which makes her a great story. It makes her a great story.
Does.
Magladroth, why do the elf gods not protect the elf souls from Slaanesh? Are they weak? Don't want to? Is there something else? Can souls escape by serving the other chaos gods? Generally speaking, the way it's written is that Slaanesh is too strong.
Yeah, so I have a lot of suggestions here for you to at least consider. The first one is the elves are doomed. Their elves are already claimed by Slaanesh for reasons unspecified. Now, if you're looking for an answer to that, the most obvious one is Slaanesh used to be their death god. There you go.
Spicy.
So before the fall, Slaanesh was their death god, and Slaanesh decided to destroy the world rather than continue on. The other gods are incapable of influencing that because they're gods of other things. They are gods of pure energy and intent and emotion. They can very rarely cross over the boundaries because that's not how gods work. And then when that god rebels and decides to destroy the world, in this case Slaanesh, when that god attempts to do something else, they're all left in the periphery going, well, all the elves are damned to it. There's nothing we can do. And they start trying to come up with ploys and plots to try and steal the elven souls away before they fall into the great hellstorm that is Slaanesh. That would be one spicy way that one could reorganize it. It's not that they're too weak, it's just that they're gods of different things. One of the great mistakes of most people who think of the gods in Warhammer is to think of them like living, breathing, thinking entities, because the only time you think of them or see them generally in the setting is when they move into the material realm. And when they do that, they become, as to use my earlier language, three-dimensional. They are stuck within the material realm's laws. You can talk to them. But when they're in the aether, they are nothing more than what they are, which is gods of a particular thing. And just because you're a god of fighting, that doesn't mean you can claim a soul. Just because you're a god of being sad, that doesn't mean you can claim a soul. Or a god of being, I don't know, magical, that doesn't mean you can claim a soul either. There is something inherently linking Slaanesh to elven souls. Now, the story that you make for that is ultimately up to yourself, because as it currently stands, the story is very, very simple and entirely pitched from the perspective of people inside the setting, not people who are in the aether. And that is, Slaanesh likes to eat them. That's it. That's all you have. So on top of that, it's up to you to decide whether you want to add more. And if you do, make something cool up. Or if you don't worry about it. Slaanesh just eats them. That'll do. And the elven gods are shown not to be weak or unpowerful in any way. They're just gods of different things. They're not gods of taking elven souls. One of the gods in particular has basically repurposed herself entirely in an attempt to become that, the good old Pale Queen, Erith Kael. But even then, she can only, at best, steal scraps from the edge of Slaanesh's table, as Sotek described it earlier. So my general answer to this one is, why do they not protect elf souls from Slaanesh? Because that's not their job. Are they weak? No. Don't they want to? Yeah, they probably do, because it's powering Slaanesh. Or is there something else? Probably something else. Can souls escape by serving other chaos gods? I would argue very, very rarely. An elf choosing to serve another chaos god is not saving their soul from their ultimate doom. They have just decided that that is what they wish to do.
Yeah. Like I would even go so far as to say, if you wanted to run with the other storyline of like, a chaos god, quote unquote, saving, but more just taking an elf god for themselves, that would probably be like a saga about like a contest between Slaanesh and whoever that was resolved in some particularly dramatic fashion.
And then it could happen. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I could totally see, for example, an elf falling to, let's say, Tzeentch, because they work together very well. In fact, elf falling to any of the Chaos Gods works well, but let's say Tzeentch. But the soul would probably, without something special, go to Slaanesh. So then you build a really cool story for Tzeentch fighting over this soul and eventually getting, even though the elf itself wishes to go to that particular court, to raise as a demon prince of Tzeentch and not fall to and be consumed by Slaanesh. One of the great reasons that Tzeentch wouldn't want to bother with it is because you put so much work into a thing and then it goes off and fuels someone else entirely. The elves, they get no great benefit from in the long term. So a really cool story about the one that does go, I think, is well worth doing.
Yep. Watchdog, somewhat off topic, but as all-powerful as become, if an Aryan was unable to wield the Widowmaker for one reason or another, what would happen? Well, if the Widowmaker had not been drawn, things, it would have been very different. It'd be hard to give like a little sound bite of like, oh, well, this would be different. It would have changed the complete course of everything that happened.
The war would have been longer. It possibly would have been lost. Chaos might have won. Widowmaker was a choice, and a terrible choice, and arguably the one that both saves and dooms the world. The elves are central to the Warhammer world and its continuing survival because of the way it's been written. And the drawing of Widowmaker is what brings the Cataclysm ultimately to an end. There is a lot of other aspects to that as well, but it is the core event that ensures a whole host of other things occur.
Yeah, because without the Widowmaker, the ritual to summon the Vortex would have probably failed. Because it only
no doubt
succeeded with the
Ulthuan would have fallen. Ulthuan would have fallen. And if Ulthuan falls, that ritual doesn't go off, which means what the Lizardmen are doing is they're attempting to wipe out all the demons also wouldn't have come off. It wouldn't have mattered if they'd killed 1 or 1 billion of them. They'd have all just popped right back up again.
Yeah, so the world probably just would have ended.
Yeah, the world would have ended. Widowmaker was the only real choice in the end.
Ryan Woodall, why don't the Elven gods or Shurin alter the fate of Elven souls going to Slaanesh and not have the power of authority? See the one we
previous answer. I hope that helped, Ryan. If you've got anything on top of what we've discussed, just ask another question. I'll see if I spot it.
Yeah, that goes well into you kind of have to find your own answer on that one territory. Mr. Pig, if they are both from the time of the Cataclysm, could Samael have known her family and that be why he's so focused on her? Yeah, so that was the crackpot thing I'm going to talk about in just a second.
I think, loosely speaking, probably yes.
Yeah, Hagen, crackpot theory, Slaanesh was an elven psychopomp who simply has claim over elf souls even after they went chaos.
I don't think that is necessarily a controversial line to make. We don't have the same connection between the Eldar and the Slaanesh and the elves in Slaanesh. So the 40k version doesn't marry over to the Warhammer version. But I would argue that there is an intrinsic link there.
Hope Edison, sorry for the off-topic question. I'm going to South Korea Wednesday. Well, I hope you have a fun trip. Safe trip. Do you think Warhammer's Korean Peninsula will be given a unique culture someday? If Games Workshop starts going in that direction, probably.
I mean, they really bloody should. One of the biggest issues, loosely speaking, one of the biggest issues of the Warhammer world is that it has, where they should have maybe 40 or 50 different cultures, they have one. Where they maybe should have about 15 cultures, they have often none. A perfect example of this is move over to the old world and look at just how many cultures it actually has and compare that to real world Europe, which is a significantly smaller area in size. And you start going, right. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all. Why is there only one? Why is there only 2? Why is there only 3 cultures? And then writers like myself have come afterwards and attempted to create and add to the empire and say that it's not just a monoculture. It is created from the tribal cultures that came before. And in fact, there's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 cultures, some of which have come from forces that you don't necessarily know, taking what was originally fan material of the Fenones over in Sylvania, for example, and giving Sylvania its own culture based upon this. And then you start going that it's not just cultural differences, there's ethnic differences, and it adds a lot of detail to the empire. But this is post its creation. The empire just had one culture to begin with. And this is an attempt to try and make it more reflective of the deeper nature of way people's work. As it currently stands, if you go east, not only is there an absolute minimum of cultures in an almost farcical way, they are also pretty much streamlined into almost a stereotype. So I think the answer would be there definitely should be, but sadly, because Games Workshop is not detailing that anytime soon, it would not surprise me if 33, 44, 55 years later, you're asking exactly the same question.
Yeah, I would say that something has to happen that draws, which it's kind of sort of started with the old world, but that we haven't even got there yet.
Yeah.
Of like GW's Eye of Sauron needs to be drawn that direction for them to start expanding things. I would say it would be stupid to say the answer is no, because there is a Warhammer equivalent of the Korean Peninsula, so there would be someone there, but we don't know anything about them.
Yep, agreed completely.
All right. Okay, so getting into some so I want to talk about Crackpot thing first, because I want to finish up with Samael, and then once we finish up with Samael, we'll go into the last aspects of Dechala. So with Samael, which the super chat earlier brought up from Mr. Pig, is that I would say it's extremely likely, and I think adds a really good element of horror, potentially, depending on which angle you decide to go with it, that Samael knew Dechala before he ascended. And that...
You want to hear total crackpot?
Sure.
Samael's her father.
Oh, that's just fucking dirty.
The whole story is about making the deal is the falling of the father. The whole story, it makes sense if it's her father.
That's way more crackpot than where I was going.
Yeah. Okay, you want to go proper crackpot, that's the obvious story. Now, elves obviously have different moralities to the other species of the Warhammer world and don't necessarily have the same issues that humanity has, for example, where mutation results from very close relationships. But that's not an elven thing. Doesn't really matter. It's definitely a horrific story, and it takes a look at the entire setup of her father and the deal he makes with Samael. The deal he makes with Samael makes no sense because the family's then left alone. Clearly, the father, in the very heart of it, is crushing himself. Okay, slowly, the world is collapsing, and the daughter's over there, and it's almost a trade-off to Slaanesh. He sells his daughter to Slaanesh. He falls to chaos. He becomes a demon prince himself, and the daughter gets away. That is a horrific story, but I think speaks to the story that's set inside the Liber Chaotica and makes a lot of sense of it, because Samael, with a slight respelling and one that's taken away from perhaps a Judeo-Christian type of spelling that you might get for a classic demonic figure or an angelic figure, and instead is just presented in an elven fashion with an ELLE at the end, for example, and maybe another small twisting. We have a clear elven name. We have clearly someone who is falling and making a deal with a demon. We have a clear demon prince that's arising from this. The whole thing makes absolute horrific sense if you go with it's dad.
See, that's interesting, because in my head, I was definitely running with the, quite frankly, the Stalker storyline.
Would also work.
Yeah, of a elf, either in a man or a woman when they were mortal, but an elf that is so deeply obsessed with someone else that they can't have. And the idea that he quite literally, despite that she is another elf, a companion of his, that he only sees her as a possession, something to have, and is so obsessed with it that gets him Slaanesh's attention and leads to that road to demonhood, and makes for... I mean, both of those are really horrific stories, just with different overall vibes, but they're both equal. They're both very horrific, but it's wow, yeah, both of those are nasty.
I think there's something quite this is going to sound like absolutely the wrong adjective to apply here, but there's something quite nice about having Samael be one of the most powerful figures of the elven court in Nagarath falling, because that court was riddled through with corruption near the end, and it had absolutely no long-term effect other than creating the Dark Elves. And even that doesn't come for some years later, centuries. It takes a long time before we get the proper Arise and Sundering. We need to have personifications of that going wrong. And having ourselves a Nagarath prince becoming the first demon prince of Slaanesh is, I think, a brilliant tale. And then having that create Dechala in its current form, the betrayal that comes along with that, choosing Slaanesh over family, choosing Slaanesh over Nagarath, the world is falling apart. And in the desperate attempt to protect their family from the end of the world, he makes a deal. Protect my family, and I will serve you, Slaanesh. And Slaanesh goes, yeah, well, you're not going to get to protect the family because she's freaking mine now. There's a really nice Undertale story that you can tell from the existing tale, which makes that tale still stand, but has a horrific real-world consequence instead. So I quite like that as a telling. Having said that, though, put me on the spot in a week's time, and I'll come up with a completely different one, because I also really like the idea of an external character. The reason that I don't go with that as my first step is because we have no external character to say, oh, it's that one over there, let's do it with them, and that builds it up.
I do like the father storyline a lot as well, because that could also allow you to explore some really interesting, like, actual world themes of, like, the idea of fathers that genuinely possess their children, especially their daughters, and that having such a bizarre, horrific twist of that she's quite literally caught between her father, essentially two versions, yet the same version of her father trying to possess her simultaneously. And it transforms her into that when she finally breaks free of it, which I like that more actually than the stalker type story, because that also has, like, it adds in this twisted sense of triumph to what she becomes, because for her, in many ways, that kind of is the good ending, despite the fact it's still a bad ending.
Which is really you always like to have proper, twisted, messed up stories when you're dealing with Slaanesh, and it shouldn't always necessarily be about, you know, pleasure. In this case, it's about ownership and possibly also competition. A father who can't cope with a daughter who's perhaps more capable than him. He is, after all, the ultimate expression of the general of Nagarath. Probably of one of the most prominent lines. We're not given the family line in particular. Perhaps even of the Anar family or one of the other core families of Nagarath. And then having that figure, having someone else that it wants to absolutely control and can't, and then effectively falling to Slaanesh to either protect them or to control them, is, I think, there's so many potential ways that story could be told that are super fascinating.
Yeah, just for some funsies, chat, I want to show you all some of the artistic depictions of Dechala in this book, because the art is gorgeous. So you have this one of just kind of like a little upper body portion, but this one is a reimagining of her classic design. But you'll note she only has 4 arms instead of 6 in this version. But what's interesting is when you turn the page, the author comes up with some other potential versions that have only 2 limbs, but this almost like shows her. But I really like how her flesh is like almost melted into parts of her face. One of the things I find really interesting is this version also shows her with a bow, as opposed to only wielding blades, which actually
nice diadem as well.
Yeah, I actually really like the idea of her, instead of her having 6 swords, like her having a bow that she uses with 2 arms, and then 4 of her arms are used for swords, giving her like that very classic elven hybridization of melee and ranged. But to turn our attention back to Dechala, her story gets way more horrific, but now it's purely about her. So what she's like as a chaos champion. One of the things that's really interesting that the author of this book decided to just take her and make her so much fucking nastier than she was in her original depiction is he actually details her poison. And her poison, the author says that he does research into it and believes that it is a concoction made from warpstone. Oh god, there's like one other ingredient. It's warpstone, sacrificial blood, and quote, the vile fluids of her fornication.
The vile fluids. You can't have good fluids.
No.
Only the vile ones.
Yeah, and she uses this to create an elixir that she coats her weapons with. And she also uses it to make an elixir that people are forced to drink.
Oh, this is where it gets bad. I find this really interesting, just to interrupt slightly, because this reinforces the idea that she is, if we just use a simple word like an apothecary, she is a classic witch with a cauldron, which I think is super fascinating because it goes against almost every other aspect of her character. But she is someone who creates concoctions.
Yeah, and also, like, being from Nagarath leans into, like, that would make sense, because Nagaroth would have a very Cainite strong influence and a Cainite strong background, and she would be around in the same court where Morathi was.
But if you want to go properly into it, the elves who were all into concoctions and making that stuff, that's Hecate's lot. Because Hecate is the ultimate witch of the elven pantheon.
True.
She's the one who creates magic and the one who creates potions and all the rest of it, and went to war with chaos right at the very beginning. So you got definitely the darker aspects of the elven pantheon being expressed here.
Yeah. So what this elixir does is that if you imbibe it, even just a drop, it completely and utterly subsumes your will. Like you become eternally enslaved to Dechala for the rest of your existence. Period. There is no resisting it. It doesn't matter what you are, whether you're elf, dwarf, man, beast man, whatever. If you drink any of this, she basically owns you, and you are enslaved to her will for the rest of your life. And it's incredibly addictive, where she has a legion of these essentially slaves, though they're not slaves in shackles, but slaves in mind and heart, that are just fawning over her and begging her for just a little more, just a drop, as they're just withering away. And if any of them are given more of it, your body cannot handle, doesn't matter really what you are, your body can't handle more than that initial tasting, even though it eventually leads to you just kind of like wasting away, because nothing else will satisfy you. You need that elixir. No other food or drink is palatable. It's disgusting. That is the only thing you want to taste. But if you have more of it, it causes you to devolve. And you turn into a chaos spawn, essentially. You literally mutate and your body warps into a horrific monstrosity that is then used by her band, the Tormentors, which get the fun in-universe name of the Tok'Nyssen, which sounds properly fun in Elven, as their war beasts. Their monstrous infantry are these people who've had too much of this elixir and have mutated into horrible monstrosities until they literally collapse. Like, if they have too much of it, their bodies just break and fall apart. That's how horrifically corruptive and powerful her concoctions are. Like, this is some of the strongest shit in the setting.
Yeah, and agreed entirely. So we're now reaching the point where we've got a character who can create arguably the best witch's broth that ever existed, which is pretty fucking cool. And it's so extraordinary that any mortal that imbibes it is lost forever. And they join her great big mass, her blobby horde of what are effectively Slanesh zombies, and the Slanesh zombies just out as a tide, grab everything back and either slay or drag it up back any mortal to make them and force them to take yet more of this horrendous stuff and join their number. Effectively, you become a zombie because they give you more of this elixir. And that is considered to be the better fate. Because the worse fate is to be taken captive, because then you very much may attract the eye of Dechala herself.
Yeah, and the thing that's really fascinating about her is that the things that she inflicts people on, whether through her elixir or her toxins from her tail and her fangs, is that being without it is literally described as a soul-wrenching agony, in the sense that it literally is not, it's not just your flesh that is demanding more, it is your etheric self. It is your very soul is screaming out for more from her, which I really, really like. I mean, obviously it's horrific, but the idea that Dechala has this extreme theme of addiction gives her such a unique flair within the Slaneshi character squad of that, you know, where it's like, oh, we've got Sigvald, who's this like ultimate expression of pride and arrogance and self-obsession. And then you have Nakari, who's this arch tempter that's all about this lust and tempting people's greed and their lust and all these things. Dechala, I think, and I really hope Total War runs with this, is this perfect encapsulation of true, horrific, demented addiction. And seeing as everyone as being beneath her, in the sense that they are slaves to her will, that she is something that is going to break free and be above all, where she sees demon princes as beneath her and wants to be above them. Because one of the things that I love about her that's original quote back from 5th edition, but is used in all or her various versions, is that as the denied one, she not only seeks to ascend, but she wants to ascend to such a level that all others are denied her equal. That there is nothing equivalent to her. No greater demon, no demon prince, that she will be the zenith, the ultimate.
Yeah. So she's fascinating. What we have through this description of her, assuming that we go with it, is the most powerful, bluntly, Chaos Champion of Slaanesh in the mortal realm. The Tormentors are the largest warband that exists. And they're not just simply those who have fallen to Slaanesh. They are those who are so far fallen to Slaanesh that other Slaanesh worshippers look at them and go, WTF? And they're also surrounded by this great horde of Slaanesh zombies who are very much gagging for everything that Dechala can give them. And they will moaning and groaning and do whatever they can to not only get more of it, but to also get more of themselves. They seem to be driving out to try and drag more people back and turn them into Slaanesh zombies by making them imbibe this horrendous elixir. She is a truly horrific entity in the Warhammer world. And the one that we have by the end times, so the one that we supposedly have that's about to attack down into apparently end. Seriously? But apparently end, the one that's about to break down into, I'm going to say it one more time, end, is probably the most powerful single force of Slaanesh in the material realm. Now, does that make her more powerful than individual demon princes? Well, it depends how you judge power. In the Aether, no. But in the material realm, not only yes, completely and utterly yes, emphatically and entirely. She's not someone who is self-obsessed and you know, on a day is bored and on a day isn't, Sigvald. She is someone who is 100% dedicated to not just Slaanesh, but herself also, and the development of everything that the Tormentors have. And she's been at it for millennia. She is pretty freaking impressive, and it's such a shame that she wasn't used more, but she is used a little bit more. Before we get to that, I'm out of focus again. Before we get to that, should we do the super chats one more time?
Yeah, we're going to do super chat stuff, and then we're going to talk about some brief end time nonsense, and then we're going to put about on
the end time bit. Will take all of 4 minutes, but it does pose some super fascinating questions.
Yeah, let's see. We left off here. I wonder how Slaanesh reacts to Nagash taking, corrupting, and resurrecting elf souls. Must be a fun story between those two whenever he brings back elf souls. I mean, so interestingly, you say that, but Nagash hasn't really done that ever in his entire storyline. He's brought back the souls of a lot of people. He supposedly ripped the soul of Krell away from the Dark Gods, so that story has some really fun
implications,
and there's a lot of little like side pieces that make you go, what's going on there? But he actually never actually, funny enough, you never really seen Nagash resurrect anything that's not human that he uses for anything major. Like, obviously we know that he makes like a lot of greenskins corpses and Skaven corpses to like mine the pits of Nagashazar and Cripple Peak, but like he doesn't really mess with the other races that much. Like, there's no story about him resurrecting dwarfs. There's no story about him resurrecting elves. Not to say that he necessarily couldn't. Like, he probably could. He just doesn't, but he may have reasons for not doing so, which also makes for a really fun story. There may be a reason where Nagash does not desire to try and rip an elf soul away and bring it back. Maybe, or
even at this point, can't.
Yeah.
In terms of the soul. We do have lots of stories of elven souls, though. And the stories of elven souls are typically those that have been, for one reason or another, bound into place using elven magic or elven gods. So, for example, if you go over to is it Haggrave? I think it's Haggrave. One of the great screaming cliffs is just filled with elven souls screaming away like mad, those who have been taken by Earth Kael. So there's also those that are sitting in the ruins of Tor Anlek that are incapable of moving on to Slaanesh afterwards because of the horrors that have been inflicted there. They have been so far removed from what Slaanesh is into a completely different place that those souls are effectively lost to Slaanesh. Such was the horror that was inflicted upon them by the High Elves. And it really does, you know, make you think. High Elves, Dark Elves, are they really that different? Meh. So, yes, there's lots of stories of elven souls that aren't necessarily going nowhere or going to Slaanesh, but they're not pretty much ever described as being manipulated by Nagash. So there's a bigger story there that I think probably needs a quick touch upon by someone.
Yeah, but that being said, that could in and of itself be a fun story to explore. Mm-hmm. Like if you're running through a campaign, you want to have a necromancer bad guy who is trying to solve a conundrum of elven undead. That could make for a very fascinating villain who would probably suffer some really hilarious setbacks from time to time.
Yeah.
That would actually be like a really good like Heinrich Himmler Doomlord of Middenheim storyline. Because those two goofballs would absolutely be trying to do that. Gotrek Gurnison, she sounds like a great villain for a priest of Solkhan, much like Valkia is to Myrmidia. Apologies for spelling live chat breaks iPad autocorrect. Well, I don't.
It really does.
You didn't spell anything wrong. Oh, except for no, everything looks fine to me. But in any event, I agree. So for those that don't know who Solkhan is a very interesting god because he's kind of a weird leftover from really old Warhammer when we had the gods of law. But he has managed to remain and has actually been reinforced in more recent writings. But Solkhan, he is a god of law, but he's very brutal. He's incredibly brutal. And is a very rigid, like, law kind of god. It is also a sun god for funsies. But I would have very much agreed that the Solkhanites, when you learn about them in Warhammer Fantasy, if you read Black Library novels, there's a number of Black Library novels that focus on like Talea and Nestalia, especially like the Brunner the Bounty Hunter trilogy, or series, I should say trilogy series. And the Solkhanites, they're fucking spooky.
Even Archeon.
Oh yeah, true.
The Archeon tales of Solkhanites popping up.
Yeah, Solkhanites, they make Sigmarite witch hunters look like little babbies, because they are that level of like, not, well, I guess you could say depraved, but they're cruel. They're incredibly cruel. And I very much agree that Dechala in their own tales would probably be a big boogeyman. One of the things that the Liber Chaotica actually hints at Decala's story that's interesting, and the author doesn't extrapolate on it, which is a shame. But one of the things he simply mentions is that Dechala has remained as a terror and a temptation to the folk of Sigmar. Implying that Dechala has dipped south from time to time, and part of her warband, and has attacked the old world and unleashed unspeakable horrors. And literally, people fell to temptation upon seeing her or being captured to drink her elixir, to the fact where she has been quite literally recorded as this horrible, temptating figure, which I love. And the idea for me that the Solkhanites would absolutely have some kind of relationship there, I think would be stupid not to explore, because you're right that she would be one of the best examples from their perspective, them pointing and saying, this is why we're needed. This is why we do what we do, because look at that thing. Look at what that thing does to people, even though in many ways what they do is just as bad.
Sure.
Because I mean, yeah, God, the Brunner the Bounty Hunter, amazing omnibus, but it makes you like Solkhanites are like the fucking worst. They're awful in that series. Let's see. What if Samael was her betrothed before turning? Yeah,
I think that's also possibly the case. Although in that case, I would be. The story is not quite as strong because it doesn't have that same sense of either longing or creepiness or stalker or some other reason why she would be utterly horrified to be passed over as a possession beyond just being a possession. In that one, this is just purely a standard, two folks getting married and the woman not being happy with it.
Yeah, this would almost be more of a tragedy, less of like an outright horror tale. which I think can work, but I wouldn't use it for her story. Because I think her story, you really need to dial in the horrificness of it to explain why she becomes what she becomes. Because Dechala, very much, when you kind of read about her personality, she has such disdain. Oh, this is something I actually wanted to talk about. I'm glad you said that because it just popped back into my mind. The thing that's really fascinating to me about Dechala is that of all the Chaos champions you meet who want to ascend to demonhood, a lot of them, it's for glory or immortality or power. But Dechala, she talks so much in her story about escaping from law and order that to me, that's almost what it feels like, is an escape of getting away from trauma, getting away from what happened to her and escaping to the only thing she can really think of, which is to go beyond, which makes for that adds a twist to her character of some really sad, deep suffering, which I like.
Which I also like. It's horrendous, but as a story, it's good.
Let's see. I was at here. Charles CK, is there meant to be anything to Slan and Slanesh having much similar mouth sounds, or is that just a coincidence? I've squinted at that for years. I too have squinted at that for a long time.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Just as a small aside, the number of manuscripts I used to receive where people would spell one or the other wrong. The same with Manan, by the way, because of the Slanesh thing, they would often spell Manan wrong. Yeah, there is absolutely no connection. It is 100% not a purposeful connect between the two of them. But various writers have hinted at, or at least thought about trying to connect them. For example, the very nature of the Slan and the core word that lies behind them hints at the fall that is to come. They are nothing more than an expression of the chaos that is to come. It is ultimately nonsense. And I would, generally speaking, just go, there's a lot of words out there. Let's not.
What is a name?
Yeah, exactly. There doesn't need to be a connection here. And it would take some relatively clever writing for me not to go, yeah, that's just bullshit.
Yeah, clever writing, just like Autumn Chant. Sexy toads.
Sexy toads. Oh, yeah. Ribbit.
Ryan Woodall, who is winning Dechala versus Valkia? I mean, that's a hell of a fight. That would certainly be a contest. That would certainly be a contest. I
love them both for very different reasons.
Yeah. Interesting. They make an excellent face. Oh, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. That's when Creative Assembly originally revealed. Y'all know how content creators work. We usually know things just a smidge faster than y'all do. When they initially revealed the matchups for Champions of Chaos of like, oh, it's Valkia, Festus, Village, and Azazel, I remember I was so bummed that it wasn't Dechala because I felt that it would have been so much more appropriate for Dechala. She matches better with them because, Azazel's a demon prince and she is not. So she would have been among other genuine mortals, so to speak. But her and Valkia have very, very similar themes, very similar stories. They're different, but they both are characters who have been remade in their gods' images, so to speak, and are so beloved in a way that is so different from anything that Nurgle and Tzeentch have. They make very good foils to one another. And I felt it was such a missed opportunity not to have them facing off as the antagonists and then having Festus and Village facing off, because Festus and Village also have very interesting foils to one another in how they became Chaos Champions and what they represent. I do feel that was a missed opportunity by CA. I understand why they went with Azazel from like a game design point, because he brought like flying and he was a more powerful wizard and things like that. But I theme wise, I feel like Dechala would have been a much better choice.
Agreed 100%. And it's a shame because we'd have almost certainly got ourselves a bit of extra Dechala lore that we could have messed around with for a bit of fun. And we all know that the stuff that's released for Total War is studio adjacent, but it's still, as far as we're concerned, extra cool that we can mine around with.
Avani, I really like this detail. Samael wanting to control Dechala being denied and now her using her connections to control others, yet she is considered the denied one. That's true. There are some interesting layers there.
There is definitely several layers to that particular onion, and it really does feel like a story that if you were, for example, to be creating Dechala right now and building a new version of her, you'd probably want to be riffing on all of this. But worth also noting that the story, just to make sure we said it one more time, is presented inside the Liber Chaotica. It's not the truth. It's not actually what happened. It is a version of it. So using it as perhaps a springboard for whatever they do next is entirely fine. So you might find that the version, should one come from Total War, might be different. And indeed, we're about to go on to that as we head into our next section.
Yeah, I will note, though, I do think there's some strengths you could do there of like exploring that maybe the denied one does not necessarily have to do with Demon Princehood, but it has to do more with something that came from before she fell to chaos, of that she was denied something. And that she does not handle denial well. You know, the reason that she creates this elixir is so that she can't be denied. Which, if you wanted to twist the story of having Dechala not necessarily be purely a victim, but having had done some horrific things herself back before the whole chaos incident, the idea, like Andy talked about her being like this follower of Hakardi, someone that dabbled in potions and apothecaryism and concoctions. The idea of her using potions to manipulate others, even back then, you know, using like the equivalent of a love potion to manipulate an elf to do something she wants, or using potions to pull strings in the court of Nagaroth. You could use that, or Nagarith. You could use that to build a really interesting tale about how maybe the eyes of Slaanesh and by extension Samael were on her for reasons not because of her beauty, but because of who she was. And that would also do a really fun job of tying her relationship with Marathi, because to be frank, they would be very well aware of each other. They were in the same court. Ain't no way those two did not deal with each other. And you know, that must have been spicy as fuck.
Yep.
Let's see here. Tokash, I don't know if you are aware, but there's a nicer and ancient tie between the Horned Rat and Solkhan from Advanced Hero Quest. Yes, I was actually reading that just the other day.
Yeah, totally. And the good old amulet of Solkhan. Agreed. And it's worth having a check if anyone out there wants to go find the various digital versions of the old Advanced Hero Quest that you can get out there. But I will note, it's not a good game. It was... I mean, Hero Quest, if anyone's going back, Hero Quest, fine game. Hero Quest is great. It's simple, but it's great. Advanced Hero Quest, oh man, there were so many rules that you could exploit in it, which made it a not great game and also not necessarily fun. But it does use Solkhan in there, and it's firmly lodged into Games Workshop existing, let's say, canon of works, meaning that it could be used by later writers, unlike the other related lore from the time, like Arianka, which was always problematic, and Malal, the fifth Chaos Power.
There you go. And then we got, here we go. It's fun to see Total War bring underused characters like Dechala, Festus, Gorbat, and so on to the forefront, allowing players to write stories that they've never really finally received. Yeah, it is nice to see a lot of these characters spawn back up. I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with Gorbat. That's going to be wild.
Yeah. I agree completely. In fact, one of the things that I particularly love about Total War is that as it slowly but surely works its way through all of the factions of Warhammer and brings various characters to life because they need them for their lords or legendary lord, whatever, that allows people to not only become aware of characters that perhaps Games Workshop have moved on from, but to start them to form deep relationships with them through playing with them, and they end up having their own favorites. And often these favorites that they're playing with week in, week out, almost to a degree go and pass by invisibly to people like Games Workshop. But I think it's great because we end up all having our own favorites within each of the factions.
Yeah, I will say, I do want to bring up this comment by Zaras, because actually this is interesting of, what if Dechala manipulated an elf with a love potion, and that is the elf who became Samael, and that's why he's so obsessed with her, and the reason she ended up being denied demonhood. The idea that she may have set into motion her own undoing, that also could make a really interesting, spicy story.
That is super close to the version that I have in my game.
Ooh,
super close. Yeah. So I really like that idea, Zaresk, for I think obvious reasons.
Yeah, the Unseen Archives. Hello, gents. Just want to say you rock. Been following Sotek since he guested on Adeptus Podcastus. That was fun. And adored Andy's works for years. You're both inspirational to me. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, appreciate thanks. That. Appreciated.
The
Massively appreciated.
Podcastus crew, they are very sweet. Always super duper fun to chat with them. Andy, would you care to take us into everybody's favorite? Okay, so everybody's favorite setting.
Lord of the End Times. We're now moving to, I don't know, is that book 5 of the various End Time books? This is the novel side of things.
Yeah,
this is
the last one.
Dealing with the end of the world. And this is not going to take long. And it is going to pose a couple of questions as we dive into it. So, Archeon decides to have a chat with all the people who are going to take down Middenheim. And he summons Dechala, as you do, from halfway across the world using methods unknown, because Dechala has been with Arbal the Undefeated, whom she hates, but let's push that aside, taking out all of Ind, and has succeeded. Yay! So that's covered in like a sentence. Dechala arrives and goes, slither, slither, I'm a snaky person, and is really not described beyond that. It's very much slither, slither, I say a couple of words, and that's about it. And she's part of the crew that takes down Middenheim. Now, interestingly, Dechala is no longer a champion of chaos. At this point, she is a demon princess and has ascended. So this is a massive change to the character.
Yeah.
This is not described. It almost feels like the author didn't know that she wasn't one, but she is marked. She is marked as being at least equal to Azazel, Azazel, whatever you want to say. I say Azazel. I literally can't take myself away from that pronunciation. I refuse to say Azazel. I just did 3 times. Azazel. She's marked as a godlike entity with power equal to or bigger than his, but all of her warband, who cares? It's gone. All of the massive armies that she was leading, yeah, they've gone. All of her stabby, potiony, weirdy stuff, yeah, none of that's mentioned in the slightest. She's just a slithery, snaky girl who is now a demon princess. She gets stuck into fighting at Middenheim, goes up against Tyrion, and gets impaled and killed. The end. That is pretty much Decala's involvement in the End Times, and there is no more. It is an absolute waste because they don't use any of the aspects of her character that have already been described elsewhere, which is a bit of a shame. They give her no real character in it. She just appears, has conversations with Arbal and Archeon like they're normal people. There's some really weird stuff going on there. No other way of putting it. Isabella von Karstein sitting there as well going, hi, I'm Isabella. We're all taking down Middenheim. It's some classic End Times fun. Then she's killed, but it's worth noting, if we go with this version of the background, she doesn't die at all because she's a demon princess and it's the material realm and she can't die. Which means that Dechala is now an open character for Age of Sigmar, as she could move on and become a demon princess and re-emerge in the later version of what comes afterwards, because we all know the End Times eventually leads to that, whether we like it or not.
Indeed.
So the only story that makes any immediate sense for that is that she has found Samael and destroyed him and dispatched him entirely so that he is no longer a thing, meaning that she then is no longer denied in one sense of the world and has then ascended to demon princessdom and sat beside Slaaneish's side. So that's pretty much it for the End Times. There's little else that we can say about it. It is, in terms of characterizing her, very poor. In terms of using the character that came beforehand, very poor. In terms of matching the character and giving her the same stuff, pretty poor. What it gives her is the same name and snaky stuff and a bit of venom, and that's about it.
Yeah, I will say that, although definitely probably not the intent, the idea that the End Times, as part of the build-up to the End Times, that she finally accomplishes demonhood, and that's one of the big, like, oh shit, the End Times is coming. Samael is dead. A demon prince, a functionally a demigod or a god, depending on how you look at it, has been slain, and she's taken his place. I think that works extremely well for an End Times trigger event. I do not think that's what Josh Reynolds intended by when he wrote that, but as an
I like to hope he did.
Yeah, I like to hope so too. But
yeah, me too, because I actually really think that the tale that hasn't been told here, but has been implied, is great. And that tale is that she has achieved demon princedom, and through doing so, the end of the world is now coming. And that she is part of one of the forces that take out one part of the the Warhammer world. Pardon me. That's fine, particularly if you go down with the many-armed Shiva nonsense things that you could easily go with there too. There's certainly some sort of bridging over that you could drop to their version of End if you wished, but it's weak and is a bit culturally insensitive. But there is definitely a story that could be built there. So I think it's pretty cool. I don't like her teaming up, even if it's just to be, we're in competition, aren't we? Arbal and me, because that's kind of how it's pitched. As she sits in the same room with him and has conversations, she literally, by the rules, has hatred to him. She should be carving him a new one. And Archeon, in his ultimate expression of who he is, should be either at least at one point saying, you will not be doing this, you silly people. I'm Archeon. I've got the mark of everybody. You must obey me and not kill each other, or something to at least nail it into place why they're not basically going toe to toe or slithery snake to, I don't know, flesh hound.
It's silly to me that they did that with Throg and Sigvald correctly, where they are infighting and they're like trying to kill one another and stuff on the side, but not with yeah,
totally.
Dechala. What's interesting is that's like the one thing the Liber Chaotica actually does not bring up about Dechala is her scar
and her
hatred of Khorne, which is, I think, a key thing to maintain. Like the idea of her getting a permanent disfigurement from Khorne, I think, is very, very key to the character.
And I think as well, to help establish what that character is, you could even have that be as part of the representation of how she fell. So rather than it being marrying her beauty, the classic, oh, women are obsessed with their beauty. Slaanesh wants the, oh, bullshit. We've got that story 1,000 times already. Let's try to get a bit deeper here and have that be something that happened before she fell. Chaos Champions that slayed through Nagarai to the north. Demons doing their business, whatever else it was, the Chaos Champion that's responsible for that and possibly murdering other parts of her family that she in turn kills, leaving her hating them with an abject hatred that cannot be ever met, is probably a bit better than just she was wandering around the Chaos Wastes, she happened to pick up a scar, and for some reason, because she's a mutant, it never got better, and she's a bit angry about it. It's a bit weak.
I actually really once again, this is crackpot theory time, but I like crackpot theories of that. I love the idea. If you want to tie in, into the story that she got really into the making and using of potions to manipulate people in her life to the point that she created like a love potion or whatever that ends up kind of inadvertently creating Samael. I love the idea that during the cataclysm, during this millennia or this centuries-long war, that she, being a princess of the court of Nagaryth, would have been out there fighting. She would have been out there facing off with demons. And the idea that a demon of Khorne gives her this horrible scar that either realistically or probably more accurately in her head makes her think that she is like lesser now. The idea that she has this horrible moment of failing in either her personal abilities or this mark on her, and she says, oh, well, I have to turn to these potions. I have to use these things to manipulate people because look at me. Like I have this scar, this marking by a disgusting demon. I need to use this to get what I want. This person that I love, he'll never love me the way I am. I need to use this to manipulate him. And that leads to this series, and that would explain that hatred being as deep as it is, of that is in some ways the truly inciting incident, which would be fun.
I broadly agree. What you're looking for is a story that speaks to why she falls and who she is, rather than a story that just sort of happens at the side.
And then her postcard that she got for traveling around the Chaos Waste. Here you go.
Yeah, indeed. And it would be better if it's all wrapped into who she is and what she is, telling a deeper story.
Okay, cool. Turning over to some super chat stuff really quick. Suggestion for a future episode: the Riemann Empire. Oh Lord, And it's on and off relationships with DW. Man, you think there's little written on Dechala, the Riemann Empire? Oh boy.
Good old Remus.
It happened at some point, but do we know anything about it other than curious geezer? Not really.
Yeah, that was something I was going to confirm when I wrote that part of the history, but I was gone before I could do it. It was in my plans.
Yeah, actually, if I recall correctly, I think in Up in Arms, which is the 4th edition supplement for Talea, they don't even touch it. Like, they don't mention Curious Geezer, they don't mention the Riemann Empire. Like, they talk about Remus, but they don't expand on the Empire, which is stupid because it should be a thing. Anyway, just another one of those things of, unfortunately, the Empire is the main character in some writers' minds. Phil, what is at the root of our hatred for Khorne? So we just talked about that. It's quite literally just a sentence. That in her original 5th edition profile, she had a special rule called hatred for Khorne, and it just mentions that she has a scar that she got from some Khornate thing.
Champion. It was a champion of Khorne, and it left her with hatred, interestingly, for all demons of Khorne and anyone with the mark of Khorne.
Yeah, and that's it. So I think me and Andy are kind of I think there's a lot of fun speculation that you can do about that. With, like Adam says here, that it might not even be the scar herself, but the weakness she felt that from being hurt, making her doubt herself in many ways. Opening up that a weakness in her personality there. But I think there's not a whole lot left to add. If there's any questions in chat, we actually, for the first time, have just a little bit of time left. Not a ton, but a little bit.
Do we? I can always go down crazy theory route.
I would love
right, let's because we have reached the end of the official lore for Dechala. There's not a lot about her. It's interesting how little there is, and also how impactful she should be. We've discussed this in the past with people like, say, the Dragon Ogres, where so little is written, but what is written is deep and impactful. And in this case, we've got a character who is, in terms of Slaanesh, enormously important, but is often completely sidelined, forgotten by the lore. So I have a really crackpot theory, which I'm kind of running with for my game only. And it's a proper one that if I were, for example, writing elves, I would not use. But I definitely do it for my own game.
That is another layer of crackpot then.
So there is a armed goddess. Her name is Hecate. And as we know, when you become an avatar, you take on traits of the goddess. I am going to put to you that everything is in place to suggest that she could be the avatar of Hecate who fell, and that arguably her father, jealous of what she was, attempted to control her, and that the story of the two of them are revolving around each other ultimately leads to not just her father falling, but the avatar of Hecate falling as well, leaving the elves in a supremely dangerous position. It's a bunch of stories that we have not really had told exactly what happened with avatars, how did they work, how did they not work. But I would argue that we have a reason here to show that she is not a mutant, that she is an elf who is an avatar of the gods, and that her mutations are not mutations at all. They are divine changes wrought upon her soul, allowing her to exist within the modern setting of 8th edition and also be the character that is mentioned in the 5th edition and other places. And what the others see as mutation is not mutation at all. It is an aspect of that goddess being brought forth into the material realm in a similar fashion to how old butterfly wings Ariel isn't a mutant. She is a physical manifestation of a goddess, although it's arguable exactly how that is being manifested, as we've discussed in other streams. But this gives you an opportunity to have an elf who is not a mutant, completely abides by all of the rules of elven mutation without having any issue at all.
What I really like about that is that would also match up really well with the 8th edition Dark Elves of Bloodwrack Medusae, which were transformed by authority into horrible snake-like monsters, which someone watching might be like, oh, but she's a horrible snake-like monster, so wouldn't it be Authority? But no, because the thing is, Authority and Hecate are sisters.
Perfect. Yes, they are.
They're deeply closely related, so their aspects would have some strong similarities, being those serpentine themes. But when you look at the six-armedness and the aspects of Hecate next to the Blood-Wracked Medusas, which are just serpents on steroids, like the snake hair and the snakes literally coming out of their bodies. If you go look at Total War, they're much nastier than the typical Medusa of regular myth. There is some real strength there.
Yes, and particularly when you look at the relationship between Authority and Hecate, where they pretty much hate each other. And largely because Authority is so beloved by the elves and so perfect and beautiful, and Hecate is not. She's a six-limbed, many-headed, probably snake goddess, and to be cursed to ugliness is to be cursed to appear like Hecate. Look at the Blood-Wracked Medusae. It's such a lovely connection of them all. There's only one thing missing, and it is deeply missing, to make this crackpot theory, which has lots of threads that all pull together. And that's that if this were the case, then surely Dechala would be an enormously powerful sorceress. And I do mean an enormously powerful one, because Hecate is the goddess of magic. And I would argue that the answer she isn't is because Hecate goes, fuck you.
So the other thing that I would say is a potential theory for that would be that her father's suppression of her, an attempt to control her, resulted in this.
Yeah, there's lots of cool stories you could make.
Though I do love the idea of the god just being like, get fucked, but she just can't get rid of her.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Hecate is the elven goddess of magic. She taught the elves magic, and during the cataclysm, she was the one who basically discovered dark magic, using chaos against chaos. And she taught the elves how to do that. Many of the elves did not like this. Other elves absolutely did. We begin to see the split between the high elves and the dark elves all the way back during the cataclysm. That's the Kadai and the Kaithari, each of which are manifesting in different ways. The gods themselves are splitting, and in turn, later on, the elves split also with the Sundering. And she is the goddess of dark magic, for want of a better and quick description. And she loves the elves, adores them, and hates her sister for how much they love her and not her. So there's a super cool obsession-based goddess sitting there, okay, who's desperate for love, who wants to be adored, and using that over to Dechala almost perfectly fits. The only thing, as I say, that's missing is the magic, but with the slightest tweak of the tale, which is the reason she has no magic is because suddenly it all makes sense.
Yeah, that works extremely well, and would also explain why her elixir is so fucking powerful. I mean, Liber Chaotica literally says the most powerful concoction in the world. Which I mean, based on what it does, divine. It is.
It is, however, and I will fully accept this just before we pick up our last little super chats here, 100% a crackpot theory. It's something that if I were writing it, I wouldn't be using this as my core description for what Dechala was. I would be almost certainly, if I was using Dechala, going down the standard tales that Games Workshop has told, because you don't want to have Games Workshop say you're making stuff up that doesn't match our lore, go away. But when for your own games and for what happens at your own table, you can do anything.
I think what would be fun for that is you wouldn't include it in Decala's story. You would include it in the Nagaroth supplement on Hecate. You would have a little bubble about her appearance and about how her avatar isn't, no one knows where it is. And leaving those little bread trails.
That's exactly what I would do. Yeah.
Yep. Watchdog, potential stream if you have the sanity for it. End times redo stream. Not all of it, but enough to end off the world as it should have.
It wouldn't be one stream.
Listen, all right, I'm going to say this with as much respect as I possibly can. Bitch, are you for real of how long that would take?
I mean, we'd have to go through all of the factions, all of the primary characters too.
We would have to
them
break
together as well. You can't do it by faction because they'd all be getting mixed together.
Oh, that's true.
So
no, we'd have to do it by like landmass.
It would be an absolute mess. And yeah, an absolute mess.
All right, here's
having said that, though, there's a part of me that goes, yeah, that would be super cool. But I think we'd be sitting there like 15 streams later going, see all those first 5 streams. Now we've had to think about it. Ignore all those because now we're doing this. And it would just keep on going. And we wouldn't stream about anything else. We would turn into, I don't know, end times beards as we slowly but surely tore our hair out, attempting to make it all work. Again, I think we would almost certainly by the end of it come up with something that was actually awesome. As we've discussed in multiple other streams, as we've come up with some alternative stories or stories that aren't so much alternative but could have happened without invalidating the other stories, but add so much more depth behind why things happen. It's a little bit like the Clone Wars to the prequel trilogy.
Oh yeah,
prequel trilogy is rubbish. It's actually rubbish. But when you add the Clone Wars, you see throughout the course of its run that it adds so much depth that you almost think that the prequel trilogy is okay until you watch it again.
I literally just watched a hilarious breakdown video. People like, man, everyone remembers the prequels as being amazing, and here's why people have that brain bug. It's because the Clone Wars were that good.
So I do think that it would be a fun stream, but I can't see any way that we could do it realistically. And besides, before we do that, we still have a second part to the End Times to potentially tear apart because we only really did like the first couple of books, as I recall.
Yeah, so that'll be something we'll do probably actually pretty soon. Is the End Times part 2 where we'll talk about kind of the latter half, where we'll really be focusing on like Thanquol and Archaon and some other notes. But that being said, Watchdog, there are theoretically some ways we could tackle it, but it would be very little niche specific stuff. I think I really enjoy that we get to kind of tackle those subjects often by just the subjects we do. Like if you go watch our Dragon Ogre stream or this one where we talk about what Dechala would have been up to in the end times, the idea that her killing Samael leads to this sudden, like that is Slaaneish's key. That's him turning his key saying it's time for the end times, where each of the Dark Gods is up to a trigger event.
And Samael goes down.
So that's like the really big one for Slaanesh. And if you go watch like our Lord Skroak stream is another really good one of what he's up to and what his aims are and how that ties into the way his story develops and into the end times and things like that. Go watch our Tehenuin stream and how Sotek is affecting the Lizardmen, and that's having this dramatic impact and build up. So yes, but I don't think it would be wise to do a stream purely dedicated to that, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think I broadly agree. I've really enjoyed, like, for example, this one where we've got ourselves a clear story. The death of Samael is in many respects a prophecy of Slaanesh, where they then go, we're now committing to the Everchosen of the era. Before Dechala was just doing other stuff, and then Dechala goes from millennia-old warband building to actual destruction.
Yeah, I actually really love the idea that people have misunderstood the idea that in universe people have misunderstood Slaanesh's response to Samael, of that it wasn't Slaanesh like being like, oh, I'll throw you a bone. It was Slaanesh literally uttering a prophecy of that when this matter is resolved, it's time.
Yep.
That's super fun. That's super fun.
And arguably you would have a very different Samael then. Then you'd have a Samael on the run.
Terrified.
Hiding. Yeah. Terrified. Trying to hide itself somehow.
Yeah, and that's also super fun because that gives you a powerful Slaanesh demon prince obsessed with trying to prevent the end times because he knows he won't be around for it.
And also one that perhaps might try and hide itself away somewhere in the Lorehammer streams. Okay, who's attached itself to a particular avatar there purely because it's seeking to try and avoid the end times. It's almost like I considered all of that.
Almost. First off, to say you make me a better writer and DM. Oh, thank you. That's very sweet of you.
Thanks.
Highlight of my week. Way off topic. How can Morghast be both undead and used to be demons? If Nagash can make undead demons, that is very bad. So, okay. So, ignoring the end times bullshit that I could just throw as a card, we should get those as buttons. Where we just can hit it.
Really should. We just go end time bullshit.
Yeah. what I would suggest is that, so the Morghast, we've got a little bit of time, so I'll wax lyrical on this for just a moment. The Morghast, for those unaware, are the big bad undead, big beefy guards that show up for Nagash in the end times as his like big fancy new models, the Morghast Harbingers and the Morghast Archai. And what is said about them in the end times is that they were essentially demons of Thra, the sun god of Nehekara, that during the first big war between Nagash and the kings, they were sent down from the sun. So like Thra, the god himself, got involved, sent down his equivalent of like greater demons or lesser demons, however you want to look at it. They fight Nagash. Nagash beats them, and then he rips them apart and remakes them in his own image into the Morghast. And you may look at that and go, well, that seems utterly impossible. And I would say, yes, but the but being that if Nagash, the level of power that he gets to during those kind of two major wars, theoretically, he could pull something like this off, especially when you consider that Nagash was the ultimate mortuary priest. Nagash understood the Nehekharan gods better than almost anyone. He would know things. If you know I'll put it this way. If you know the true name of a demon, you can do things with that demon. Think about demonic weapons, of taking a demon and binding it into a material form, being a weapon or a suit of armor. The idea that Nagash could create undead host bodies that he then takes these demons and stuffs them into these mortal material forms and binds them under his control, he could do that, theoretically.
Yeah, but bluntly, he's got more than enough magical power to screw around with that sort of stuff. We've discussed in the past concerning what Nagash sort of was as a material entity, became almost a material god. And there is absolutely nothing there that I think goes against what it was, particularly given the root and origin of those entities. So yeah, totally fine. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
it's not one that I go. It's not one where I'm like, "Oh, that's weird." It totally makes sense to me.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where I read it and went, huh, and then I read it and went, oh, yeah, I can see it. Yeah, it works. And also, I will say, I really love the strong implication about it just bluntly saying, yeah, the Nehekharan gods had demons. Which they should. Like, they should have had etheric entities that would have shown up during their heyday.
I mean, and strictly speaking, they're not demons. They're just spirits of the aether.
It's a spirit.
They're demons are what the chaos god ones are generally called, but you could see them as an equivalent of angels if you're looking for words that are more common.
They're literally just described as like Christian angels, the way they look. Yeah. The angels of Petra. Yeah.
Absolutely. So there is absolutely no reason why they wouldn't exist. There's a variety of examples of other gods who have got their own divine messengers that have arrived in one fashion or another. The equivalent, for example, with Mor and the divine ravens that come flying in, the death ravens that do Mor's work. So yeah, it's not an uncommon thing.
Ramudo, love the Phoenix King tier stream. We're glad you did. That was really fun for us. Finnabar is the best. Would love to see you guys with a tier ranking of key high elf princes as well. Much love, guys. Well, we'd have to figure out what defines a key high elf prince.
That's a toughie, isn't it?
Which, especially when you're dealing with multiple editions, that would get really difficult really fast.
It really would get really difficult really fast. If you haven't watched our tiering stream yet, do go check it out. That was on, that Lorehammer channels? That was on Lorehammer channels. So you'll find that over on, in fact, the very channels you're on just now. Go pop over to YouTube, Lorehammering, if you want to watch it. We sat down and we ranked each one of the Phoenix Kings, the good old A to D and then S tier examples. And the actual chat around that and all the lore, and also different ways to try and look at some of these Phoenix Kings when you actually try to extrapolate what they did beyond the simple words and the focus of the text at each point, really does start making you think about the Phoenix Kings in perhaps different ways. So even if you do know the lore really well, I recommend watching it because we have some pretty spicy takes through the course of that one.
Yeah, Andy said some quite literally sacrilegious shit about Kaldor the First.
Oh yeah, I did enjoy that.
Well, one thing that wasn't touched upon in this stream is what Samael would be up to try and get Dechala back, undermine her schemes, eventually try to escape the retribution coming his way. Lots of fun stories that could be told with him. So that's very true. One of the things that would actually be a core thing would be, what is Samael doing to deal with the Dechala situation, of the idea of Samael not only hiding, but likely having a cult of trying to influence mortals to seek out and kill Dechala, or to bring her down or force her back to him.
Alternatively, to bring her back into the fold and make her bend the knee, depending on which version of the story you go with.
Bend the snake body.
Well, yeah, bend the body. Yeah, I think that's not just a fair comment to make there. I think it's a very fair comment. Who was that brought that? Was that Phil? Yeah, it was.
Yes,
so I agree completely, Phil. But in some respects, we've not covered that because we weren't really doing a Samael stream per se. But I do think it's worth noting that Dechala, for all of her many, many successes, almost certainly is also both being hounded by and arguably trained by Samael. And the hounded by part being the attempting to bring her back on side through one fashion or another. But every time that it reaches out and tries to effect change upon Dechala, Dechala has succeeded. Dechala is entirely free, which means that she has succeeded again and again and again and again, meaning that Samael is nothing more than a trainer, someone who is making Dechala better, someone who's making Dechala learn how these entities may attempt to manipulate her and her to become, at the end of it, on top. So I would argue just generally that Samael is doing something. Now, that could be trying to bring her down. That could be trying to persuade her to his way of thinking. That could be trying to hide. That could be a variety of things. But whatever it is trying to do, if it directly influences Dechala, it has entirely failed.
Yeah, I will say, one idea you could really play around super fun with if you're doing a Wolfrip campaign is you could have a character who believes he's being inspired by some divine prophecy to slay this horrible champion of the dark gods, whether he thinks it's like a Grail or like a Bretonnian thinking he's influenced by the lady, or a Sigmarite hearing the voice of Sigmar, or an Ulrican or whatever, when really it's Samael. Like having him play the role of almost a Bellicor-like scheme/figure to try and manipulate great champions into Decala's path for whatever reason. And that could make for a really fun storyline.
In fact, I would argue that if you were Samael and you were, for example, trying to stop Dechala from slaying you, for example, and you knew that was going to come at the end times, you might cite yourself right beside the core point of the end times that we know Archaon's looking for, which means Samael would be beside Middenheim.
Mm-hmm. Not that there's anything in Andy's series about that at all. Nope. Absolutely not.
I haven't thought about that. Not at all.
Samael totally is not on the inside the house. Demon Prince in the house. Yeah. Singemeister discussing various prophecies. Such as the prophecy of demise, the battle axe of the last war, the thousand thrones, egg of the Quango, the harpies and Karakar, etc. Could be a fun Wednesday stream. That could be a very fun Wednesday stream, is discussing various prophecies.
Yeah, there is quite a lot of prophecies out there. Choosing which ones would be hard because there's lots of prophecies that are out there that might be only in like one or two sources. I did a Q&A the other day where somebody was asking about skin changers and similar, and how many different versions of there are in the lore. And I kind of just copped out and went, there's loads of different versions, pick, which was weak. And somewhat similarly, I felt weak at the time. Somewhat similarly of prophecies, there's so many of them. And you've got the Necrodomo, the insane set for the end times. They're an obvious pick, but there's some of them that are in the books and an individual novel, which are so important that you can barely not include them till you realize that they're only in that one novel. Toss that novel and it never existed. So it's a bit of a toughie.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that anytime super soon, because I would literally have to sit down and get a list of all of them and be like, okay, these are the ones that would be fun to talk about. This one would be dumb. But that is an idea that we could use at some point.
I have a way, actually. I'm just going to bring it back up so that we've all got it on screen. If you want this to happen, I would like you all to go out and find them. So
go do the work for us.
Go and do the work for us, because we obviously are doing lots of other streams about lots of other things, and this is a potentially huge topic, which not because it's necessarily that big to discuss. It sounds like an easy stream's worth, but it's huge in terms of if we're going to do it properly, we got to cover a really wide set of sources. That's something that we can't do individually.
Yeah, I can think of at least 5 prophecies already that are not on this list.
I'm in exactly the same place. And that being the case, you would need to, I think, between you all out there to grab us a list of at least like 25 to 30, because I can think of a bunch. Sotek will think of a bunch, but there's going to be a bunch that didn't immediately come to our minds that are hidden away in one place or another, which we really should cover. So if you want it to happen, help.
Yeah, yes, that would be grand. If we could just be handed a Google Doc and then we could go, oh, okay, we could work with this.
I'm going to bring up Hawk's comment. Hawk's comment just slipped there. I'm also intending to do a map of Altdorf relatively soon. So if you are over in my Discord server, that's the Lawhammering Discord server, and you've got any sources to hand, be that books, be that novels, be that games, I've got a spreadsheet in there in one of the threads. I'll do a quick everyone on it when I go in there, but I've got a feeling because it's inside the thread, it won't ping everyone, but who cares? I'll do a quick link to it somewhere. If you've got some of those sources, do check those as well at the same time for Altdorf references so that I can get them all onto the map.
I also can confirm for you that it won't work. You have to do it in a normal thing, linking.
You have to do it in a normal thread, linking to it. Yeah, that's what I was going to do. Yeah.
Otherwise it'll only link the people that have joined the thread.
Yeah, and I didn't know that the last couple of weeks. It was a pain in the neck because I was everyoneing down in threads that nobody saw.
Nobody's here.
Yeah, totally. Very annoying.
Do you have any closing thoughts? Because we're coming up on time.
I do. I actually have a couple of closing thoughts on this one. Dechala is, I'm going to state it relatively bluntly, the most important Slaanesh character that the Warhammer world has. Dechala is also the least covered, given the nature of her importance. She leads the biggest warband. All of her various iterations make this clear. It's a unique and interesting warband that goes beyond the simple concept of warband to army. She has been going for almost the entire length of the Warhammer world. From the beginning of it, from the Cataclysm, right through to the end times. And in the end times, she raises, if we go with our end times option, as a demonic princess, as it's described in that particular novel. And she is responsible for sacking an entire realm along with Arbal the Undefeated. She is there right at the very end and gets taken down by Tyrion, an epic battle that should have in and of itself had more time spent upon it, because Tyrion by that point is pretty much a god in and of himself. We have ourselves a character who has gone from a beginning that's vaguely described right through to the end, which is relatively tightly described, yet managed to do so in about 10 paragraphs of actual setting and only appearing in a single edition of Warhammer, and that's 5th. She has been woefully underserved. And hopefully Total War will come and give us the Dechala we deserve. Now, I think it's quite likely Dechala will not have all of her big screaming Slaanesh zombies, purely because that will probably be a pain in the arse to program. It would be cool if she did, but I imagine that won't happen.
I will bet you a stupid amount of money she'll have a skill that gives them a lot of high leadership, and her faction will be called the Tormentors, and that's as far as they'll go with it.
And I reckon you're almost certainly right about that. But I think that this character deserves more space. She's one that, for all of the words that she's been given, is clearly important, but it never reflected. So I like this one. In fact, I like a lot of them. And I think that this one could very easily tie to the greater lore of Warhammer in ways that it hasn't been, because we've got ourselves a beginning story for her, which is super spicy, because she's in the court of Anarion. She's mixed up with a greater demon. A demon prince of Slaanesh. She's got this weird story going on with her father, who is one of the primary figures in the defense of Ulthuan. There's so much tragedy just waiting to be mined here. We've come up with some examples of how that could manifest through the course of this stream. Obviously, because we've just spun them up out of nowhere during the course of this stream, we think they're the best examples. But that in no way means that they are the only ways that they could be done. When Total War comes, they'll almost certainly go with something like, she was an elven princess. Oh, her father dealt her a nasty blow. Samael came along and turned her into this, and now she's going to wage her way across the world, destroying everything. Slaanesh, corruption. Away you go. Probably.
The classic. Someone sitting there going, "Oh, what? I've got our lore here." And they're like, "All right, you need to fit it in this much text. This is all you get. Make it work."
Yeah, totally. I think it'll be a fun one. I really hope that she gets added.
Bobfoot, elf character exists. Andy, no, listen. If there's a meme y'all need to understand about Andy, is that Andy's full of shit. Because what he does is you pull anything, any character from the entire setting in front of him, and he's literally that meme of the guy slapping the top of the card, being like, "This is the best fucking thing it can fit." So many good stories in it.
Yeah, pretty much. I love pretty much all of the Warhammer characters, so it's easy, particularly given that we've had quite a few elf-facing streams of late, to easily think that's the case. Totally not the case. I just freaking love all of them.
Yeah,
except for maybe Gelt.
Even that's not true.
Shush! You're ruining it.
Real quick, last few things. Make sure if you haven't already to be sure that you're subbed and everything here. And we'll just a reminder that we'll be on my channel next week for the vote is in.
Oh, what is it?
We'll be talking about Vermin Lords of the Great.
Oh, nice! Oh, I love Vermin Lords. I remember when the first Vermin Lord came out, and I was freaking delighted. I painted 3. This is going to be amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun.
I just want to bring out a comment because someone just threw a challenge and it was a good Gorst. Yeah. You know, listen, you got a fair point there.
Gorst has went from a character that I absolutely hated to I like him now. It took about 5 years, but he got there.
It's more, he's not that important. What's he blooming doing in the game in the first place?
That'll eternally be his thing. But if I have to be stuck with him, I've gotten used to it.
Thanks everyone. That's been a really good stream.
Yeah. Last thing is just make sure that for Lawhammer, join them on Twitch on Fridays for more episodes. And thank you, Armand. Thank you very much. And also, the Rookery is back on a weekly basis.
Weekly. Yeah, we're going to be speaking to 2 very famous authors next week. It's going to be super, super fun. Yeah, because they're starting an entire new imprint for science fiction and fantasy.
That's how you know it's a new season of Rookery, because Andy actually knows what's happening this upcoming Saturday.
Oh, well, yeah. I do. That'll last for about another day, maybe 2. So yeah, every single Saturday at 7 p.m. UK time, you can find us there. And obviously, go buy Dark Deeds if you haven't done already. Please, it makes me a very happy man, and it will help me go and buy myself a nice sub for lunch, which would be absolutely lovely.
Yeah, very last things will be on my channel for something this Wednesday. We're going to figure out, and also the poll for not next week's Lorebeards, but the ones after that will be up on Andy's channel later today.
Later today.
So we're going to go figure that out. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Certainly so. Bye-bye.